My name is Harriet Dawson. Most people call me Hattie. I am 29 years old. 3 years ago, at a Thanksgiving dinner table, my mother looked me in the eye and laughed. She told me I would be renting until I died. My father raised his glass and cheered to my older sister's brand new $800,000 mortgage. I did not scream. I did not cry. I folded my cloth napkin, placed it next to my plate, and walked out the front door. My father followed me to the porch. He told me if I left, I was no longer part of his family. I kept walking. 3 years of silence followed. Not one phone call, not a single text message. Then last Tuesday, a beat-up sedan scraped its front bumper against the concrete of my driveway. My parents stepped out carrying 3 battered suitcases. Before I tell you exactly what happened next, take a second to like and subscribe to Blueberry Revenge. Drop a comment below telling me your age and what city you are watching from right now. I always want to know who is listening. It was a humid Tuesday evening in Nashville, the kind of thick summer heat that settles heavy on your shoulders. I stood on the wraparound porch of my Craftsman home. The wood planks were freshly stained. The mortgage was fully paid off. I held a glass of iced tea and watched the sedan idle in front of my manicured lawn. The engine ticked. A thin trail of gray smoke drifted from the exhaust pipe. The driver's side door opened. My father William stepped out. His shoulders slouched under a wrinkled dress shirt. He did not look up at me. He stared at the driveway pavement and dragged a heavy canvas suitcase from the back seat. My mother Barbara emerged from the passenger side. She wiped a bead of sweat from her forehead. She looked at my porch and frowned. The 3 years had etched deep lines around her mouth. She did not say hello. She did not ask how I was doing. "Hattie, come down here and grab this bag," she said. Her voice carried the same sharp edge it always had. "My back is killing me, and we need to get out of this heat." I did not move from the porch steps. The ice shifted in my glass. I looked at the rusted car and the broken zippers on their luggage. William finally lifted his head. His eyes were bloodshot. "We lost the house, Hattie," he said. His voice was barely a whisper. "We lost the house and the savings. We have nowhere else to go." Barbara swatted at a mosquito and pointed at my front door. "You have a spare room, right?" she asked. "I hope your landlord keeps the air conditioning running. Call whoever owns this place tomorrow and tell them you have long-term guests staying with you. We will take the master bedroom since your father needs the space for his back." I took a slow sip of my tea. The condensation dripped onto the cedar floorboards. This house was my sanctuary. I had worked 3 jobs to buy it. I had scoured public records and negotiated the closing myself. My parents saw none of that. They only saw a safety net they felt entitled to use. They stood on my property demanding the best room in a house they assumed I did not own. They invaded my quiet evening expecting me to absorb the consequences of their financial ruin. They expected the daughter they threw away to smile and carry their bags inside. To understand how they ended up standing on my porch with broken luggage, you have to understand how they treated me when they thought they were on top of the world. The memory of our last conversation tasted like bitter ash. It was Thanksgiving Day 3 years earlier. I sat at my parents' mahogany dining table in their pristine suburban house. The room smelled of roasted sage and expensive cinnamon candles. My mother brought out the good crystal. She only did that when she wanted an audience for a performance. The audience that evening consisted of my older sister Jessica and her husband Tyler. Jessica was the family trophy. She was 2 years older than me and had spent her entire life following a script my parents wrote for her. She married Tyler, a man who wore designer suits and leased luxury vehicles, but jumped from one vague tech startup to another. They projected wealth, but anyone paying attention could see the cracks. I paid attention. I always paid attention because my survival depended on reading the room. My parents treated Jessica like royalty. I was treated like an underperforming employee they could not figure out how to fire. Halfway through the meal, my father tapped his silver fork against his wine glass. A hush fell over the room. He stood up at the head of the table, his chest puffed out under his tailored sweater. "I have a very special announcement to make," he said. He looked at Jessica and beamed. "Your mother and I are incredibly proud to share that we just helped Jessica and Tyler close on their dream home in Brentwood." Jessica clapped her hands together and leaned into Tyler. She flashed a perfect practice smile. "It was not cheap," my father continued. $800,000. But when you see a young couple with such a bright future, you do whatever it takes to support them. Your mother and I co-signed the mortgage. We are thrilled to be part of this milestone." My mother raised her glass. To the new homeowners, she chimed in. They all clapped. I lifted my water glass and took a quiet sip. I knew Tyler had been out of steady work for 6 months. I knew Jessica carried terrible credit card debt because she had complained about it to me over the phone just weeks prior. Co-signing a loan of that magnitude for a couple drowning in liabilities was a catastrophic financial decision. But in my family, appearing successful always superseded actual stability. The conversation shifted to paint swatches and kitchen island renovations. I listened for 20 minutes before I decided to share a milestone of my own. I thought perhaps the mood of celebration might stretch far enough to include me. I have some news too, I said, putting my fork down. I am taking my real estate license exam next month. I have been studying every night, and a local broker already offered to sponsor me once I pass. The table went dead silent, the kind of silence that sucks the air out of the room. Tyler let out a short, breathy chuckle. He looked down at his plate and shook his head. My mother set her wine glass on the table. The crystal made a sharp clink against the wood. She looked at me with an expression of pure pity mixed with disgust. "Hattie, please," she said. Her voice dripped with condescension. "You have always been the slow one in this family. Real estate is a cutthroat business. It requires sharp math skills and a relentless drive. You barely scraped by in high school algebra." I felt a familiar heat rise in my chest. The label of being slow was a chain they had locked around my neck since childhood. I processed information differently. I took my time. I preferred steady caution over reckless speed. To them, caution meant incompetence. "I have been studying the market for 2 years, Mom," I replied. My voice remained level. "I know what I am doing." My sister rolled her eyes. "Hattie, you live in a tiny apartment on the edge of town. You pay, what, $1,200 a month?" She looked at Tyler as if sharing an inside joke. "You cannot even afford to buy your own place, and you want to tell other people how to buy houses. It is embarrassing." I gripped my napkin under the table. My living situation was a deliberate choice. I paid $1,200 a month because I was stockpiling cash. I lived far beneath my means so I could build a foundation that would not crumble under pressure. "There is nothing wrong with renting while saving capital," I said. I looked directly at my father. "At least my name is the only one on my lease. I am not asking anyone to take on nearly $1 million of debt for me. Taking on an $800,000 mortgage without stable income is financial suicide." The temperature in the dining room plummeted. The polite veneer shattered. My father slammed his fist onto the table. The silverware rattled. "Excuse me," he barked. The veins in his neck pushed against his collar. "How dare you speak to your sister that way? How dare you sit at my table eating my food and insult the choices your mother and I make?" "I am not insulting anyone," I said. I kept my posture straight. "I am stating a mathematical fact." "You are jealous," my father shouted. He pointed a shaking finger at me across the turkey and the cranberry sauce. "You have always been bitter. You look at Jessica and you see everything you will never be. She is building a legacy. She has a husband and a beautiful new home. You are going to be renting until you die, Hattie." My mother nodded in agreement. Her face flushed with righteous indignation. "We do everything for this family," she said. "We sacrifice everything to lift our children up, and you just want to drag us down to your level. You have zero ambition, and you despise anyone who does." The injustice of the accusation tasted like copper in my mouth. I worked 50 hours a week. I spent my weekends reading county property records and zoning laws. I had saved $40,000 in pure cash while they financed an illusion of wealth. "I am not dragging you down," I said quietly. "I am trying to warn you. You are building a house of cards." My father stood up. His chair scraped harshly against the hardwood floor. He threw his napkin onto his plate. "Get out," he demanded. His voice dropped to a low, menacing register. Dad Jessica started playing the peacemaker role now that the damage was done. "Do not ruin Thanksgiving over her." "I said get out," he repeated, ignoring my sister. He stared at me with eyes devoid of any parental warmth. "If you cannot respect the people who put a roof over your head growing up, then you do not belong in this house. You do not belong in this family. Walk out that door, Hattie, and do not bother coming back until you are ready to grovel for forgiveness." I looked at my mother. She stared right back, her chin tilted upward, daring me to challenge his decree. I looked at Jessica, who was busy inspecting her manicured nails. Not one of them viewed me as a daughter or a sister. They viewed me as a prop designed to make their own choices look superior. I did not raise my voice. I did not shed a tear. I simply stood up. "I will not be asking for forgiveness," I said. I turned my back on the dining room and walked toward the front hallway. I pulled my wool coat from the closet. The fabric felt heavy against my shoulders. My father followed me to the front door, ensuring his dominance lasted until the very end. "If you walk out now, we are done," he said. His hand rested on the brass doorknob. "No phone calls, no financial help. When your little real estate fantasy falls apart, do not come crying to us. You are on your own." I stepped onto the front porch. The November air was sharp and cold, cutting through my sweater. I turned to face him one last time. "I have always been on my own," I told him. "You just made it official." He slammed the door in my face. The sound echoed down the quiet suburban street. The deadbolt clicked into place, locking me out of the only family I had ever known. I walked to my used Honda Civic. The engine sputtered before turning over. As I pulled away from the curb, I looked at the glowing windows of their house. They were probably pouring more wine. They were probably congratulating themselves on excising the negative energy from their perfect lives. They thought they had discarded a burden. They did not realize they had just handed me the greatest gift of my life. They gave me clarity. They severed the emotional anchor that had kept me doubting my own potential. The pain of the rejection burned in my chest, but underneath the pain, a new feeling took root. It was a cold, calculating determination. I drove back to my small $1,200 apartment. The space was cramped and the heating unit rattled, but it was mine. I sat at my kitchen table, opened my laptop, and pulled up the real estate study guide. The sting of their laughter fueled my focus. The memory of my mother's disdain became the metronome for my work ethic. Renting until I die. That was her prediction. I promised myself that night I would never rely on anyone else for a roof over my head. I would learn every inch of the Tennessee housing market. I would build wealth so quietly and so securely that no one could ever use money to control me again. The scapegoat was dead. 3 years had passed since that night. 36 months of grueling, invisible labor, and now the very people who had slammed that door in my face were standing on my driveway, sweating in the summer heat, begging for a room. I blinked, bringing myself back to the present moment. My father was still staring at the pavement, waiting for me to obey his command. My mother was still pointing at my front door. The audacity hung in the muggy air between us. I set my glass of iced tea on the porch railing. The ice shifted again. It was time to show them what I had been doing during those 3 years of silence. To understand the silent standoff on my porch, you have to look back at the exact moment the front door slammed shut 3 years earlier. When my father turned the deadbolt on Thanksgiving night, he intended to break my spirit. He expected me to fail. He assumed the cold reality of the world would send me crawling back to his driveway, begging for a handout. Instead, the click of that lock became the starting pistol for my new life. The days following my banishment were entirely isolated. My phone never rang. My inbox remained empty. The family had drawn their line in the sand, and I was firmly on the outside. Without a safety net, the margin for error dropped to 0. If I missed a rent payment, there was no childhood bedroom to return to. If my car broke down, there was no father to call for a tow. The fear of failure morphed into a relentless internal engine. I stopped mourning the loss of my family and started building a fortress to protect myself. I immediately took on 3 jobs to stay afloat while studying for my real estate exam. My alarm went off every morning at 4. I opened a local coffee shop in East Nashville, pulling espresso shots and wiping down counters until noon. At 1 o'clock, I transitioned to a cramped cubicle doing data entry for a logistics firm. On weekends, I worked as a receptionist at a sprawling apartment complex, handing out brochures and walking prospective tenants through model units. Every spare minute was dedicated to my textbooks. I studied zoning laws, property taxes, and contract contingencies during my lunch breaks. I listened to audiobooks on negotiation tactics while driving my sputtering Honda across town. The exhaustion was a heavy physical weight settling deep into my bones. My hands cracked from washing coffee mugs. My eyes burned from staring at spreadsheets under fluorescent lights. My mother had always called me the slow one, mocking my deliberate pace. But in the lonely quiet of those grueling months, my deliberate nature became my greatest weapon. I absorbed the material methodically. I did not just memorize definitions to pass a test. I learned how the mechanics of wealth actually functioned. 6 weeks after being kicked out, I sat for my Tennessee real estate exam. I passed on the first attempt. Holding that printed license felt like holding a key to a vault, but securing the license was only the first hurdle. Breaking into the booming Nashville housing market required capital connections and an instinct for survival. I interviewed with several boutique brokerages before meeting Vivian. Vivian was a 60-year-old broker with sharp eyes and a reputation for closing the toughest deals in Davidson County. She did not care about flashy marketing or designer clothes. She cared about numbers. During my interview, she looked at my worn shoes and my careful, calculated answers. She saw the hunger I was trying so hard to hide. Most new agents want to sell million-dollar mansions on day one, Vivian told me, sliding a stack of files across her desk. They want the glamour, but glamour does not pay the bills when the market shifts. If you want to survive in this industry, Harriet, you have to learn the dirt. You have to find the properties no one else wants to touch. Vivian became the mentor my parents never were. She threw me into the deep end of the business. While other novice agents hosted open houses serving sparkling water and baking cookies, I was digging through public records. Vivian taught me the intricate world of distressed properties. She showed me how to trace tax liens, negotiate with desperate sellers, and navigate the ruthless environment of county courthouse foreclosures. I learned that real estate was not about granite countertops or hardwood floors. It was about leverage. It was about spotting the financial cracks in a foundation before the whole structure collapsed. Every time I analyzed a defaulting mortgage, I thought of my parents co-signing an $800,000 loan for my sister without blinking. I began to see the housing market as a brutal reflection of human psychology. My first year as a licensed agent was a masterclass in extreme frugality. The Nashville market was exploding with out-of-state investors driving prices sky high. When my first commission check started rolling in, the temptation to upgrade my life was strong. My coworkers bought new cars and signed leases on luxury downtown apartments. I ignored the noise. I kept my rusty Honda. I stayed in my cramped $1,200 rental. I lived on rice beans and discount produce. Every single dollar of my commission went directly into a high-yield savings account. My family thought I was drowning in poverty. They assumed my silence meant I was struggling, too ashamed to admit defeat. The truth was, I was stockpiling ammunition. 14 months into my new career, I found my first major opportunity. It was a distressed duplex in a working-class neighborhood poised for gentrification. The property was a disaster. The roof sagged, the gutters were rotting, and the interior smelled of stale smoke and damp mildew. Traditional buyers took one look and walked away. I saw a gold mine. I drained my savings account to the penny. I utilized a first-time homebuyer program. Vivian helped me secure putting down just enough cash to cover the closing costs and the initial repair budget. When they handed me the keys, I sat on the stained linoleum floor of the empty living room and let out a breath I felt I had been holding for over a year. I owned land. I owned equity. The real work began that very night. I employed a strategy called house hacking. I moved into the worst half of the duplex, sleeping on a deflated air mattress surrounded by drywall dust. During the day, I sold houses for Vivian's brokerage. At night, I wore a respirator mask and ripped up decades-old carpet. I watched internet tutorials to learn basic plumbing and drywall repair. I painted every wall, installed new fixtures, and transformed the neglected units into modern, clean living spaces. The physical labor left me with bruised knuckles and aching muscles, but the financial payoff was immediate. 2 months later, I signed a tenant for the second unit. Their monthly rent payment covered my entire mortgage plus the property taxes. My living expenses dropped to zero. That single transaction shifted my entire reality. I was no longer just a real estate agent. I was a property investor. The internal war of endurance began to tilt in my favor. I took the cash flow from the duplex and poured it into wholesale marketing. I sent letters to absentee owners offering quick cash closings. I built a network of contractors and hard money lenders. I worked with a cold efficiency that Vivian praised. My parents' voices still echoed in my head during moments of doubt. I could still hear my mother laughing at the dinner table. I could still hear my father shouting that I was jealous and bitter. But the sting of their words faded with every successful closing. I realized I was no longer working to prove them wrong. I was working to build a fortress so high they could never reach me again. By the end of my second year, I leveraged the equity in the duplex to purchase a second property, then a third. I registered an anonymous limited liability company named Southern Roots Holdings to shield my identity and protect my assets. I kept my name off the public deeds operating in the shadows of the booming market. I preferred the anonymity. I wanted the wealth without the target on my back. The holidays were always the hardest test of my resolve. Thanksgiving and Christmas passed with heavy silence. I spent those days walking through vacant properties or updating my spreadsheets. There were moments of profound loneliness where the urge to call my sister or text my mother crept into my mind. I wondered if they ever thought of me. I wondered if my father ever regretted slamming the door. But my discipline held firm. Reaching out meant handing them power over my emotions. I refused to surrender the peace I had fought so hard to build. Entering my third year, I shifted my focus entirely to the pre-foreclosure market. It was a grim business, but highly lucrative. I spent my mornings reviewing the notices of default filed at the county clerk's office. I looked for homeowners who were drowning in missed payments, searching for opportunities to negotiate short sales before the banks took the properties to the courthouse steps. It was repetitive, tedious work. I scrolled through hundreds of names and addresses every week, scanning for the right parameters. I treated the data with clinical detachment. To me, these were not families losing their homes. They were simply numbers on a screen representing potential yield. That detachment held strong right up until a rainy Tuesday morning in early October. I was sitting at my desk in Vivian's office holding a fresh cup of black coffee. The computer screen glowed brightly in the dim light of the early hour. I downloaded the latest batch of defaulted mortgages from the Davidson County Registry. I began my usual routine, running my eyes down the columns of parcel numbers, outstanding debt amounts, and property addresses. My gaze drifted down the spreadsheet. My pulse remained steady until my eyes locked onto a very specific string of text. I stopped breathing. I leaned closer to the monitor. The coffee cup trembled in my hand, spilling a warm, dark drop onto the mahogany desk. The address listed on line 42 of the foreclosure registry was a sprawling McMansion in Brentwood. It was the exact address my parents had bragged about 3 years ago. The $800,000 dream home belonging to my sister Jessica and her husband Tyler was 90 days past due. The golden child was defaulting. I stared at the screen as the pieces of the puzzle began to click together. My mind raced past the initial shock and straight into the analytical framework Vivian had taught me. If Jessica and Tyler were defaulting on the primary mortgage, the cascading financial impact would be devastating. And I knew precisely who had co-signed that loan. I minimized the spreadsheet and opened the county property assessor portal. I needed to see the full scope of the damage. I typed in my parents' home address, the house I grew up in, the house where I was told I would amount to nothing. When the financial records loaded onto my screen, the quiet routine of my morning shattered entirely, giving way to a realization that would alter the course of our family history forever. The cursor blinked on the county portal. The screen loaded. I stared at the property history for my childhood home. William had paid off that modest 3-bedroom house when I was in middle school. He used to stand in the concrete driveway boasting to the neighbors about the virtue of being debt-free. He lectured me constantly on the moral failing of owing money to banks. He wore his clear title like a badge of honor, wielding it to judge anyone who rented or took out loans. The ledger staring back at me told a wildly different story. 18 months ago, a new lien was recorded against the property. It was a home equity line of credit. The principal amount borrowed was $350,000. The lender was a regional credit union known for issuing high-interest loans to desperate borrowers. My stomach tightened as the grim math laid itself bare. My parents had owned their home free and clear. They had a fortress of safety. They had a secure retirement. But when Jessica and Tyler started drowning under the weight of their $800,000 Brentwood mortgage, William and Barbara did the unthinkable. They mortgaged their own survival to keep their favorite daughter afloat. I needed to see the full scope of the disaster. I opened a new tab and navigated to the Davidson County Civil Court dockets. I typed in Tyler's legal name. The search results populated instantly. The screen was a graveyard of fiscal ruin. There were 3 separate judgments filed within the last year alone. One stemmed from a luxury car leasing company for a repossessed imported sedan. Two others originated from major credit card issuers for unsecured debts totaling over $90,000. I typed in Jessica's name next. Her results were just as damning. Her pristine image was funded by American Express and Discover. The lawsuits detailed years of missed minimum payments and ignored collection notices. Tyler had lost his job at the boutique tech startup months ago. The public business filings showed his independent consulting firm had been administratively dissolved for failing to pay basic state franchise taxes. The golden child was entirely bankrupt. The facade was shattered. I leaned back in my leather desk chair. The commercial brokerage office was quiet. Vivian was in a client meeting down the hall. I was alone with the darkest secrets of the people who had banished me. I closed my eyes and pictured that Thanksgiving dinner. I remembered the smug tilt of my sister's chin when she mocked my $1,200 monthly rent. I recalled the blistering heat in my father's voice when he told me I would never amount to anything. They had sat at a dining table overflowing with roasted turkey and expensive wine, wrapping themselves in a thick cloak of superiority. Every single word out of their mouths had been funded by borrowed money. They were financing an illusion to punish a daughter living in reality. They called me slow. They said I lacked the intelligence to understand the housing market. Yet here I was sitting in a premier real estate office, holding the deed to 3 performing income properties while they careened toward total insolvency. The unfolding tragedy was strictly mathematical. A home equity line of credit requires mandatory monthly interest payments. If my parents had drained $350,000 to float Jessica's underwater mortgage, they were bleeding cash every 30 days. My parents were retail workers and mid-level managers who had retired 2 years ago. They lived on a fixed pension. There was no physical way they could sustain the carrying costs of their own newly acquired debt while simultaneously backstopping a failing luxury estate. I returned to the foreclosure registry. I checked the current status of the Brentwood house. The bank holding the primary loan had issued a notice of trustee sale. The property was scheduled to be auctioned on the courthouse steps in exactly 90 days. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I pulled up the parcel number for my parents' home. I held my breath and clicked the status icon. The screen refreshed. The background color of the listing shifted from green to red. A notice of default had been filed 3 weeks prior. The credit union had officially initiated foreclosure proceedings on my childhood home. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The ruin was not just impending, it was actively unfolding right now. My parents had tied a heavy iron anchor to their ankles and jumped into the ocean to save a daughter who was already at the bottom of the sea. They were all drowning together in real time. A normal person might have picked up the phone. A dutiful daughter might have rushed to their aid, offering to help negotiate a short sale or structure a repayment plan. I was not a dutiful daughter. William had stripped that title from me the moment he locked his deadbolt. He had drawn a permanent boundary, and I intended to respect it. I did not feel a sudden rush of vindictive joy. Vengeance is a messy, emotional reaction. Vivian had trained me to remove emotion from every single transaction. Instead, I felt a cold, clinical focus. I was looking at 2 distressed assets in a highly competitive real estate market. The personal history attached to those assets was irrelevant to the numbers. I evaluated the Brentwood house first. It was severely over-leveraged. The outstanding debt far exceeded the current market value. Tyler and Jessica had bought at the peak of the market bubble and failed to maintain the physical property. Buying that house at a public auction would be a terrible investment. The numbers did not make sense for my portfolio. I closed that file and deleted the address from my watch list. The bank could absorb that loss. Then I turned my attention back to the modest 3-bedroom house where I grew up. My parents' home sat on a 1/4-acre corner lot in a neighborhood undergoing rapid gentrification. Wealthy developers were tearing down older structures on that street and building modern multifamily units. The land alone was incredibly valuable. The outstanding debt on their home equity line was $350,000, but the current market value of the property was easily double that figure. It was a prime target for a cash buyer. It was the exact type of property Southern Roots Holdings specialized in acquiring. The ticking time bomb had a precise detonation date. The Tennessee foreclosure process is notoriously swift. Once a notice of default is filed, the lender can auction the property in as little as 60 days. My parents were paralyzed by their own pride. I knew their psychological profile perfectly. William was too arrogant to declare bankruptcy. Barbara was too obsessed with appearances to list the house for a traditional short sale and admit defeat to her neighbors. They would hide in the dark, ignoring the certified warning letters from the bank, praying for a miracle that was never going to arrive. They were going to lose the house. That was an inescapable economic certainty. The only question left was who would be holding the deed when the dust finally settled. I opened my business accounts on a second monitor. I reviewed my liquid reserves. I had been saving every penny of my rental income and commission splits for nearly 3 years. I had established a strong relationship with a local hard money lender who trusted my underwriting and approved my funds quickly. I had the capital. I had the legal framework. I had the precise expertise they claimed I lacked. I closed the county portal and minimized the spreadsheets. I stood up from my desk and walked to the office window. The Nashville skyline stretched out before me, a jagged horizon of construction cranes and reflecting glass towers. The city was transforming through calculated investments and ruthless market shifts. I was learning to do the exact same thing. I made a silent vow to myself standing in that quiet office. I would not intervene. I would not warn them. I would let the machinery of the financial system run its natural course without any interference. I would wait patiently in the shadows, operating strictly behind the shield of my anonymous limited liability company. The impending disaster was their own creation. My only role would be to clean up the wreckage. The autumn leaves turned brown and stripped away from the trees across Nashville. I tracked the legal filings every single Friday. In Tennessee, lenders must publish a notice of sale in a local newspaper 3 times before they can auction a property. I bought the paper each week. I turned to the classified section. I traced my finger down the columns of tiny black text. There it was. My childhood address printed in cheap ink flanked by dates and dense legal jargon. William and Barbara had 60 days to save their home. They needed to pay the past due balance on the home equity line to halt the process. I knew their finances inside and out. I knew they did not have the cash. I could not show up at the courthouse myself. The real estate investor community in Davidson County was a tight circle. If my parents or their neighbors happened to drive by and saw me standing on the steps holding cashier checks, the illusion would shatter too early. I needed a ghost. I hired a proxy bidder. His name was Marcus. He was a retired title attorney who placed anonymous bids for out-of-state hedge funds. I paid him a flat fee to represent Southern Roots Holdings. We met at a coffee shop in East Nashville 2 days before the auction. I handed him a thick manila envelope containing certified funds. It was the terrifying sum of my life savings and a hard money loan combined. December 4th arrived with a biting wind. The foreclosure auctions took place on the concrete plaza right outside the county courthouse. It was a harsh, unfeeling environment. There were no wooden gavels. There were no velvet ropes. It was just a substitute trustee standing in the cold reading legal descriptions while investors huddled in winter coats waiting to deploy their capital. I parked my car a block away. I rolled down the window just enough to let the crisp air in. I had Marcus on a live phone call. The phone sat on my passenger seat on speaker mode. "They are reading the docket now," Marcus said through the speaker. His voice was calm. "There are 4 other buyers showing interest. The dirt is good. They know the current zoning allows for multi-unit builds. Stick to the ceiling," I told him. "Do not let emotion drive the number." The trustee called out the address. My childhood home. The place where I learned to ride a bike. The place where I was told I would never succeed. The opening bid was set by the credit union to cover their losses. $312,000. Another investor immediately raised a hand. $320. $330, Marcus countered. The bidding war was rapid. It lacked any dramatic cinematic pauses. It was just men in coats exchanging numbers that represented the total liquidation of my parents' legacy. The price climbed steadily. $350, $360. I watched a man in a gray fleece shake his head and walk away. "We are at $380,000, Marcus murmured into the phone. Only one guy left. I ran the mental calculus. The land itself was worth $500,000 in this zip code. The structure could be flipped or leveled. Either way, the profit margins were deep green. "Take it to 4, I instructed. Marcus raised his hand. $400,000. The last remaining investor looked at his clipboard. He frowned, tapped his pen against the paper, and turned his back. The trustee scanned the small crowd. Hearing no further bids, he declared the property sold to Southern Roots Holdings. The transaction took less than 4 minutes. In 240 seconds, the physical foundation of my parents' arrogance was wiped clean. I hung up the phone and rolled up my car window. The heater blasted warm air against my face. I did not cheer. I did not celebrate. I shifted the car into drive and headed back to my office. It was a Tuesday. I had client meetings scheduled for the afternoon and deals to underwrite. The aftermath of a foreclosure is a slow, bureaucratic grind. The trustee recorded the new deed with the county clerk. My limited liability company was now the sole legal owner of the quarter-acre lot and the 3-bedroom house. My identity was shielded by a registered agent in Delaware. If William or Barbara tried to look up who bought their home, they would only find a generic corporate address and a heavy wall of privacy laws. Owning the property was only the first phase. Gaining possession was the second. Tennessee law requires the new owner to formally evict the previous occupants if they refuse to vacate after a foreclosure. I knew William would not leave quietly. He would cling to the walls of that house, believing he was the victim of a rigged economy. I hired a local eviction attorney. I gave him strict instructions. There were to be no cash for keys offers. There were to be no generous extensions. He was to follow the letter of the law with clinical precision. A process server drove to my childhood home and taped a detainer warrant to the front door. It was a formal notice to vacate the premises within 10 days. The plaintiff listed on the document was Southern Roots Holdings. While my attorney handled the eviction, I monitored the fate of Jessica and Tyler. Their Brentwood mansion suffered a different outcome because they owed $800,000 on a property that was rapidly deteriorating. No investor stepped forward to bid. The bank took the mansion back as a real estate-owned property. Jessica and Tyler were locked out by the county sheriff a week later. The golden child lost her stage. Her designer furniture was hauled away in a rented moving truck. The entire family structure was collapsing simultaneously. The hierarchy that had defined my existence was burning to the ground. The people who had mocked my cheap rental and my careful savings were now legally homeless. The 10-day notice expired. I received an email from my attorney confirming that William and Barbara had surrendered the keys to the property management lockbox and vacated the premises. They left the house empty, avoiding the humiliation of a forced physical removal by law enforcement. I drove to the property that evening. The streetlights flickered on, casting long shadows across the dying winter grass. I unlocked the front door using the master code my property manager had provided. The house echoed with a hollow, eerie silence. The walls where family portraits used to hang were bare, revealing faded squares of paint. The mahogany dining table where I was humiliated and banished was gone. I walked through the empty rooms. I stood in the exact spot in the hallway where my father had pointed his finger and told me to get out. The air was stale. I felt the hardwood floors beneath my boots. I owned the floor. I owned the walls. I owned the dirt beneath the foundation. I had acquired the ultimate trapdoor. I held undeniable legal leverage over the ruins of their financial legacy. They were wandering the city looking for shelter, blind to the fact that their discarded daughter controlled the very ground they used to walk on. I locked the door behind me and drove back to my paid-off craftsman home. I knew they had exhausted their credit. I knew Jessica had no room for them. The collision was inevitable. It was only a matter of time before they ran out of options and showed up on my driveway seeking mercy. I went home, poured a glass of iced tea, and waited for the headlights to appear. The ice in my glass shifted one final time, bringing me back to the muggy reality of the Nashville summer. The memory of my childhood home sitting empty dissolved into the present moment. My father was still staring at the pavement of my driveway. My mother was still pointing at my front door. They did not look like the proud homeowners who had banished me 3 years ago. Their clothes were wrinkled from riding in a car without reliable air conditioning. The arrogance that used to radiate from them had curdled into a desperate, frantic energy. Yet even in their ruined state, they could not shed the habit of dominance. They still viewed me as the subordinate child. William let out a heavy sigh and grabbed the handle of the canvas suitcase. The wheels ground against the concrete walkway. He started marching toward the porch stairs. He did not wait for an invitation. He did not ask if it was a good time. He simply moved forward, expecting the world to part for him, just as it always had. Barbara followed close behind him. She fanned her face with a folded piece of mail. She paused at the base of the steps and scrutinized the exterior of my home. Her eyes swept over the freshly painted trim, the neat rows of blooming hydrangeas, and the flawless mulch beds. I had spent hours doing that landscaping myself. "Well, your landlord keeps the place decent, at least," she said. Her tone was dismissive, waving away the beauty of the property as a mere minimum requirement. She climbed the first 2 steps, her breathing shallow and ragged. "Call them tomorrow morning and tell them you have long-term guests. We will be taking the master bedroom. Your father's back cannot handle a cheap mattress, and we have been sleeping in this awful car for 2 nights." She reached out to push past me. She aimed her hand toward the brass handle of my front door. I did not shrink. I did not step aside. I planted my boots firmly on the cedar floorboards. I shifted my weight and moved directly into her path. My body became a solid barrier between my parents and the entrance to my sanctuary. The sudden block caught Barbara off guard. She stumbled back a half step, her hand hanging in the empty air. "Excuse me?" she snapped, her brow furrowed in genuine confusion. "Move out of the way, Harriet. We need to get inside and cool down." "You are not coming inside," I said. My voice was calm, but it carried a hard, resonant edge. William dropped his suitcase. The canvas hit the wood with a dull thud. He looked up at me, his face flushing with a sudden surge of heat. The vulnerability he displayed just moments ago vanished, entirely replaced by the familiar hostile authority he used to control our household. "Stop playing games," he barked. He pointed a rigid finger at my chest. "We do not have the energy for your stubborn attitude today. We lost our home. We lost everything. Open the door and help your mother with her bags." The demand hung in the humid air. For a fleeting second, my mind flashed back to my teenage years. I remembered how his booming voice used to make me freeze. I remembered how I would apologize for things I never did just to keep the peace. They relied on that programmed compliance. They were betting their shelter on the assumption that I was still terrified of their anger. "I am not playing games," I replied. I kept my hands relaxed at my sides, demonstrating my total lack of fear. "I am telling you that you are not crossing this threshold." Barbara let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "You have got to be kidding me. After everything we are going through, you are going to stand there and deny your own flesh and blood a place to sleep. We are your parents. You forfeited that title 3 years ago," I reminded her. I held her gaze, refusing to look away. "You locked me out in the cold and told me never to return. You told me I was on my own. I took you at your word." William stepped onto the top porch stair, closing the distance between us. He used his height to try and intimidate me, towering over my space. It was a physical tactic he had perfected over decades. He would crowd you until you felt small. But I was standing on the elevated threshold, giving me the high ground. "That was different," he insisted, his voice rising in volume. "You were being disrespectful to your sister. You deserve to be taught a lesson. This is an emergency. We have nowhere else to go. The banks took everything. We are family, and family helps each other when things get tough." The hypocrisy was staggering. When I was struggling to build a life, they mocked me. When they hit rock bottom, they suddenly remembered the concept of family loyalty. They wanted to rewrite history on my porch, erasing their cruelty to secure a comfortable bed. "You only remember we are family when you need a favor," I said. I did not raise my volume to match his. Lowering my voice forced them to stop shouting and listen. "But that is not how this works. You do not get to throw people away and then dig them out of the trash when it is convenient for you." Barbara grabbed William's arm. Her face contorted with a mix of fury and panic. "Harriet," she hissed, "do not do this. Do not be cruel. I need to lie down. We will pay you whatever rent you want once we get back on our feet. Just open the door." They were offering hollow promises they could never fulfill. They had no money. They had no credit. If I let them through that door, they would dig their claws into the walls and never leave. They would drain my resources, complain about the accommodations, and treat me like the hired help in my own domain. The house would become a battleground. "I am not being cruel," I stated. "I am enforcing the exact boundary you established. You told me to never come back until I begged for forgiveness. I am giving you the same courtesy. I am not letting you in." William reached for the door handle himself, attempting to bypass me entirely. It was a bold physical challenge. I stepped laterally, blocking his arm with my shoulder. Our bodies collided for a brief, tense second. He recoiled, his eyes widening in shock. He realized I was not going to yield. I was prepared to physically defend the perimeter of my home. "Do not touch my door," I warned him. The air between us cracked with hostility. "You little brat," he spat. The desperation finally stripped away the last veneer of parental concern. He clenched his fists at his sides. "I should have known you would act like this. You were always a bitter, selfish girl. You are enjoying this. You are enjoying watching us suffer." "I am not enjoying anything," I corrected him. "I am simply refusing to save you from yourselves." The standoff reached a fever pitch. We were locked in a stalemate on the cedar planks. The cicadas buzzed loudly in the trees surrounding the yard, amplifying the intense pressure of the moment. My parents stood stranded with their broken luggage facing a daughter who had evolved into a brick wall. They were out of options and out of authority. Before William could launch another verbal attack, a harsh screech of tires echoed down the quiet suburban street. The three of us turned our heads toward the sound. A silver luxury sport utility vehicle sped around the corner and swerved erratically toward my property. The wheels jumped the curb, and the car slammed into park right behind my parents' rusted sedan, blocking them into the driveway. The silver paint was coated in a thick layer of road dust. The front bumper was dented. I knew that vehicle. I had seen it parked in the driveway of the Brentwood mansion 3 years ago. The engine shut off. The driver's side door swung open wide. Tyler stepped out onto the pavement. His designer shirt was untucked and stained. Seconds later, the passenger door opened. Jessica emerged. Her perfect blonde hair was tied in a messy knot. She held a large leather designer tote bag under her arm, looking frantic and exhausted. The family reunion was suddenly complete. The golden child had arrived on my lawn, bringing a fresh wave of chaos to my doorstep. The battle was about to expand, and my boundaries were about to face their ultimate test. Jessica slams the heavy passenger door shut with enough force to rattle the windows of her luxury sport utility vehicle. The metallic thud echoes down my quiet suburban street. She stands on the pavement and scrutinizes my neighborhood. Her nose crinkles in immediate distaste. She is looking at the modest ranch homes and well-kept lawns of my middle-class subdivision. 3 years ago, she sat in her custom kitchen and sneered at my lifestyle. Today, she wears dirty yoga pants and carries a designer leather tote bag stuffed haphazardly with whatever belongings she could grab before the county sheriff locked her out. Tyler walks around the hood of the vehicle. His posture is entirely defeated. He drags his feet across the concrete. The man who used to boast about startup equity and European vacations now looks like a deflated balloon. He opens the rear hatch and starts pulling out bulging black garbage bags and oversized suitcases. They did not even have the time to pack their items properly. They just shoved the remnants of their shattered lives into plastic. Jessica marches up the driveway. She does not look at William or Barbara. She barely glances at me. She treats the space like a cheap hotel and assumes I am the concierge. "Hattie," she barks. Her shrill voice pierces the humid Tennessee air. "Tell Tyler to stop dragging my velvet bags on the pavement, and come help us carry this stuff inside. It is roasting out here and my phone battery is dead." She speaks to me with the exact same tone she used when we were teenagers. It is the voice of a ruler commanding a peasant. She assumes the past 3 years never happened. She assumes my home is her designated backup plan. I stay rooted to the porch. I do not flinch. I watch her climb the first concrete step. "Hello, Jessica," I reply. My tone is flat and devoid of any welcoming warmth. "I see your housing situation took an unexpected turn." Jessica freezes on the second stare. She looks at me as if I just spoke a foreign language. Her eyes dart to William and Barbara, who are standing to the side looking panicked and exhausted. "Mom, tell her to open the door," Jessica complains. "I have been sitting in gridlock traffic for an hour. The bank changed the locks on us this morning. Can you believe that? The bank just walked in and threw us out into the street. We had to leave the imported dining table behind." Barbara instantly shifts into her role as the ultimate enabler. She reaches out and strokes Jessica's arm. "Oh, my sweet girl," she coos. "I am so sorry. I know how stressful this ordeal is. Do not worry, we are going to get you settled inside right now. Hattie is just being difficult, but we will get you a cold drink and a soft bed." The sheer delusion unfolding on my cedar planks is astounding. Barbara is legally homeless. She has been sleeping in a rusted sedan for 2 nights. Yet her first instinct is to coddle the very daughter whose reckless spending bankrupted her. She prioritizes Jessica's comfort over basic reality. The golden child remains untarnished in her eyes, even while covered in the dust of total financial collapse. Tyler trudges up the stairs, hauling 2 heavy trash bags. He drops them near my feet. He wipes his forehead with the back of his hand. "Hey, Hattie," he mumbles. "Man, this neighborhood is a real step down for us. Do you have a secure garage we can put this stuff in? I do not want anyone stealing our electronics while we figure things out." The audacity takes my breath away. Tyler is begging for shelter while simultaneously insulting the community that offers it. He stands on my property, a man who failed to pay his own franchise taxes, judging the safety and status of my home. I look from Tyler to Jessica, then to William and Barbara. The entire toxic unit is reassembled. The hierarchy they established decades ago is trying to reform right in front of me. They want to swarm my sanctuary. They want to turn my quiet, organized life into an extension of their chaotic ruin. Jessica crosses her arms over her chest. "Why is the entrance still shut?" she demands. She glares at me. "Hattie, stop standing there like a statue. I need to take a long shower. And tell your landlord the plumbing better have decent water pressure. I am not dealing with a trickle after the day I have endured." She steps forward, planning to brush past my shoulder and seize the brass handle. I shift my stance again. I widen my feet, anchoring myself to the floorboards. I raise my right hand palm, facing outward. "Stop right there," I command. My voice slices through her complaints. It is loud enough to echo across the yard. Jessica halts. Her mouth drops open. Tyler blinks, taking a cautious step backward down the stairs. "Nobody is going inside," I state. The words drop like heavy stones. I am not a bellhop. I am not a hotel manager. And I am certainly not opening this door for a group of people who treated me like garbage and now expect me to clean up their mess. Jessica turns her incredulous gaze toward our parents. "What is wrong with her?" she asks. "Dad, tell her to move. We do not have time for her little inferiority complex today." I am drained. William rubs his temples. The stress is visibly aging him by the second. "Hattie, please," he groans. "We can discuss all of this past drama later. Right now, your sister needs a place to rest. We all need a place to rest. Just unlock the deadbolt. We are not asking anymore. We are telling you." He steps up to the top stair, joining Jessica. Barbara moves in close behind him. Tyler flanks them on the right. 4 people pressing forward. They are testing the physical boundary. They are trying to use sheer numbers to overwhelm my resistance. They assume I will eventually cave under the collective weight of family pressure. They assume my boundaries are made of paper. "You are telling me nothing," I reply. I maintain my eye contact, focusing directly on William. "You lost the right to give me orders the night you threw me onto the street. You bet everything on Jessica. You drained your home equity to save her sinking ship. You made your choice. Now you get to live with it." Jessica lets out a dramatic scoff. "Are you seriously throwing a tantrum over Thanksgiving 3 years ago? Grow up, Hattie. People lose money all the time. The economy is terrible right now. It is not our fault the tech industry took a dive. It is not my fault the mortgage rates adjusted. Stop acting like you are better than us just because you managed to keep paying rent on this tiny little house." She points a manicured finger at my pristine siding. "This place is barely big enough for 2 people, let alone 5. But we are willing to make it work. So stop being a petty child and let us inside. If you are worried about your landlord finding out, we will hide our cars down the street. Just open the door." The word landlord hangs in the humid air. It is the linchpin of their entire delusion. They believe I am just a tenant. They believe I am subservient to some invisible property owner. They think I am clinging to the bottom rung of the economic ladder, terrified of breaking a standard lease agreement. Their arrogance is their blind spot. They cannot fathom that the daughter they branded a failure has surpassed them. They cannot conceive that while they were buying imported furniture on high-interest credit cards, I was building an empire in the shadows. William crosses his arms, mirroring Jessica's aggressive posture. "I am losing my patience, Harriet," he warns. His tone drops back to that familiar, threatening gravel. "Call your landlord right now. Get them on the phone and get this cleared. If you do not, I will call them myself and explain that you are locking your own destitute family out in the heat. Let us see how they feel about your character." I look at the 4 of them. They are united in their entitlement. They are bound together by their shared incompetence. They are waiting for me to pull out my phone and ask for permission to let them ruin my home. The time for silence is over. It is time to dismantle their reality. I reach into the side pocket of my leather work tote resting on the porch chair. My fingers trace the edge of a thick folded document. I pull it out, preparing to show them exactly who they are dealing with. I do not reach for my phone. I reach into the side pocket of my leather work tote resting on the porch chair. My fingers trace the edge of a thick folded document. It is a certified copy of the warranty deed I keep in my bag for tax purposes. I pull the heavy cream-colored paper out and hold it in my hand. I do not need to call anyone Dad, I state clearly. My voice carries no tremor. It is the voice of a professional accustomed to closing hard deals. William glares at the paper. What is that he demands? Are you holding up a lease agreement? We do not care about your lease terms. I step forward and unfold the document. I hold it directly at his eye level. The official county seal catches the fading evening light. The bold black ink spells out the legal description of the property, the parcel number, and the recorded owner. I am the landlord, I tell him. I own this house. I own the land it sits on. I own the driveway you parked your cars on. And I own the fully renovated duplex down the street. The silence that follows is absolute. The buzzing of the cicadas in the trees seems to abruptly stop. The distant hum of highway traffic fades away. It is the kind of profound, total silence that occurs when a foundational truth is violently shattered. William stares at the paper. His eyes scan the lines of text. He reads my full legal name printed plainly under the grantor-grantee index. His mouth opens slightly, but no sound emerges. The aggressive red flush in his cheeks drains away, leaving his face a pale, sickly gray. Barbara leans in close to look at the document. Her eyes widen as she processes the official county stamp. She looks from the paper to my face, then back to the paper. The cognitive dissonance is paralyzing her. She has spent 29 years constructing a narrative where I am a slow, incompetent failure. That narrative just slammed into a concrete wall of undeniable legal proof. You own this, Jessica whispers. Her voice is stripped of its usual sharp edge. She stares at the neat rows of blooming hydrangeas and the perfectly maintained cedar planks. You bought this house. I did not just buy it, I correct her. I paid it off entirely. There is no mortgage. There is no bank hovering over my shoulder threatening to take it away. I own it free and clear. Tyler lets out a low whistle. He looks at the fresh paint and the pristine landscaping with new eyes. He looks at me, the sister-in-law he used to mock, with an expression resembling sheer terror. The man who lost a luxury lease and a tech consulting business realizes he is standing in front of a self-made powerhouse. The power dynamic shifts. It is a physical, tangible realignment on the porch. Moments ago, William and Barbara were towering over me, attempting to bully a tenant into submission. Now they are trespassing on a private estate owned by a millionaire. They are homeless beggars demanding entry to a castle built by the person they banished. William takes a slow, trembling step backward. He lowers his hand. His shoulders slump forward. The imposing authoritarian father figure vanishes entirely. In his place stands a broken, exhausted man who just realized he bet his entire life on the wrong horse. How he stammers. The single word is a fragile, desperate plea for an explanation. How did you afford a house like this? You were making minimum wage at a coffee shop. You said you were renting an apartment. I worked 3 jobs, I reply. I saved every single penny. I learned how to identify distressed assets, and I built a portfolio while you were busy bragging at the dinner table. I did exactly what you said I could never do. I learned the housing market. Barbara puts a hand to her mouth. She looks like she might be physically ill. The reality of the situation is crashing down on her. The daughter she viewed as a disappointment is the only person in the family holding a safety net. But you never told us, she says. Her voice cracks. Why did you not call us and tell us you bought a home? We would have celebrated with you. We are your parents, Harriet. We should have known. I let out a short, humorless laugh. You made it explicitly clear that you did not want to hear from me unless I was crawling back to beg for forgiveness. You drew a hard line. I respected it. I built my wealth in silence because sharing it with you would have meant inviting your criticism and your control back into my life. I preferred peace over your approval. Jessica shakes her head rapidly. Her perfect blonde hair falls out of its messy knot. This does not make any sense, she protests. The market has been terrible. Interest rates are sky high. Tyler and I lost everything because the system is rigged. It is impossible for you to be debt-free. You must have had help. You must have found a rich partner. She cannot process my success without attributing it to someone else. The golden child cannot accept that the scapegoat simply outworked and outsmarted her. I did it entirely on my own, Jessica, I state. I used my own capital. I ran my own numbers. The system is not rigged. You just made catastrophic financial decisions to look rich while you were going broke. I made smart decisions to become rich while looking poor. Tyler looks down at his scuffed shoes. He knows I am right. He knows the difference between faking wealth on credit and building actual equity. He is standing next to a mountain of plastic garbage bags that represent the sum total of his false empire. The air grows thick with a new kind of tension. The initial shock of the revelation begins to fade, and the survival instincts of my family kick in. The boundaries of the conflict expand. They are no longer dealing with a rebellious subordinate. They are dealing with a wealthy relative who holds the ultimate solution to their crisis. My parents and my sister exchange a series of rapid, silent glances. I can see the wheels turning in their heads. I can see the panic transforming into calculation. They are recalibrating their strategy in real time. William clears his throat. He attempts to straighten his posture, but the commanding presence is gone. He attempts a weak, apologetic smile that does not reach his eyes. "Well, Harriet," he begins. His tone is suddenly soft, diplomatic, and dripping with false affection. "I have to admit I am shocked. You really proved us wrong. You built a beautiful home here. You should be very proud of yourself. Your mother and I are very proud of you." The whiplash is nauseating. 3 minutes ago, I was a stubborn brat who needed to obey orders. Now I am a source of pride. The affection is entirely transactional. Barbara steps forward, nodding eagerly. "Oh yes, sweetheart," she chimes in. "We are so incredibly proud. You always were a hard worker. We just wanted to push you to reach your full potential. It seems our tough love really paid off." She tries to take credit for my success. She tries to reframe her cruelty as a parenting strategy. It is a desperate maneuver to rewrite history and bridge the emotional gap she created. Jessica pushes past William. She drops her designer tote bag on the porch floor. The anger on her face is replaced by a bright, frantic eagerness. "Hattie, this is amazing news," she exclaims. She claps her hands together exactly like she did when they announced her mortgage 3 years ago. This changes everything. The sudden shift in their behavior is more repulsive than their initial hostility. I watch them pivot from aggressive bullies to groveling opportunists without a shred of genuine remorse. They do not care about the pain they caused me. They do not regret throwing me out. They only care about the equity sitting beneath my feet. I fold the deed and place it back into my leather tote. I keep my expression neutral, waiting for the inevitable demand. "Changes what exactly?" I ask. Jessica gestures wildly at the house. "Well, you have this entire place paid off," she says. "That means you do not have to worry about a monthly mortgage payment. You have all this space and no financial pressure. It is perfect." William steps closer, closing the distance again, but this time his hands are open in a gesture of supplication. "We are family, Harriet," he says softly. "Family helps family. We hit a rough patch, but knowing you have this kind of stability changes the whole dynamic. You have plenty of room for all of us. We can move our things inside tonight, and we will not have to worry about rent while we figure out our next move." The conflict morphs entirely. The initial demand for entry was based on dominance and authority. This new demand is built on emotional extortion and weaponized entitlement. They view my hard-earned wealth as a communal asset. They believe their blood relation grants them unlimited access to my sanctuary. The parents who refuse to co-sign a small car loan for me expect me to permanently absorb the cost of their massive financial failures. The sister who mocked my apartment expects to sleep in my spare bedroom for free. The battle lines are redrawn. The true test of my boundaries begins right now. The sheer audacity of the demand hangs in the humid Tennessee air. I watch the realization wash over their faces, replacing exhaustion with a predatory gleam. They are no longer homeless victims. They are prospectors who have just discovered a vein of gold on public land. William continues to hold his hands open in supplication. The aggressive stance he used just 5 minutes ago is gone. He is attempting to look reasonable and weary. "Come on, Harriet." he says, his voice adopting a paternal hum he has not used since I was a child. You do not need this entire house to yourself. You have 3 bedrooms here. Jessica and Tyler can take the guest room. Your mother and I can take the master bedroom. You can keep your office or whatever it is you do in the 3rd room. It is a perfect solution. Barbara steps up beside him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. She nods enthusiastically. Exactly, William. It is a blessing. It really is a blessing from above. She looks at me with eyes that are suddenly bright and calculating. We have been praying for a miracle, Hattie, and here you are. Since the property is paid off, we do not have to worry about monthly rent holding us down. We can use our remaining cash to buy groceries and help with the utility bills. It will be just like old times. The idea of recreating old times sends a cold shiver down my spine. Old times meant I was the scapegoat. Old times meant sitting at a mahogany dining table, listening to them mock my ambitions while pouring their resources into Jessica. They are not asking to share my home. They are announcing a hostile takeover, dressed up as a family reunion. Jessica pushes her messy blonde hair behind her ear. Her demeanor transforms completely. The frantic, desperate woman who stepped out of the luxury sport utility vehicle vanishes. In her place stands the entitled golden child returning to claim her throne. Honestly, Hattie, this is the least you can do, she says. She crosses her arms again, looking around the porch with a critical eye. Mom and Dad sacrificed everything for us growing up. Dad paid off his mortgage so we could have a stable childhood. If you are sitting on a paid-off asset, it is only fair that you step up and support the family now that things have shifted. We are a unit. The mental gymnastics required to reach this conclusion are staggering. Jessica maxed out credit cards to furnish a Brentwood mansion she could not afford. William and Barbara drained the equity from their secure retirement home to bail her out. They orchestrated a massive financial collapse through their own arrogance and greed. Yet they stand on my porch pointing fingers at my success, claiming my discipline is a communal resource they have a divine right to access. I keep my hands relaxed at my sides. I maintain a level, neutral expression. I refuse to give them the explosive emotional reaction they are trying to trigger. You are right about one thing, Jessica, I state clearly. I am sitting on a paid-off asset. I look directly at William and Barbara. But you are wrong about the dynamic. We are not a unit. We stopped being a unit the night you threw my bags onto the front lawn and told me never to return. Barbara flinches. She attempts a look of wounded maternal shock, pressing a hand to her chest. Hattie, please. That was 3 years ago. Families fight. People say things they do not mean in the heat of the moment. You cannot possibly hold a grudge forever. We are in a crisis. You did not say it in the heat of the moment, I correct her. My voice is steady and low, forcing them to strain to hear the words. You made a calculated decision to sever ties because I pointed out the mathematical reality of your co-signing disaster. You mocked my rental apartment. You called me slow. You locked the deadbolt and never checked on me once in 36 months. You only remembered I existed when your bank accounts hit 0. William sighs loudly, running a hand over his face. He is trying to project the image of a patient father dealing with an unreasonable teenager. We were trying to teach you a lesson about respect, he lies. It was tough love. We wanted you to learn how to stand on your own 2 feet. And look at you now. It obviously worked. You built a great life. You should be thanking us for pushing you out of the nest. The gaslighting is so blatant it almost feels surreal. They are actively attempting to take credit for the wealth I built, precisely because they abandoned me. They want to rewrite their cruelty as a masterclass in parenting. I am not thanking you, I reply. And I am not opening this door. Tyler shifts uncomfortably near the bottom of the porch stairs. He looks at Jessica, then at William. He realizes the manipulation tactics are failing to penetrate my boundaries. Hattie, listen to reason, Tyler interjects. His voice cracks slightly, revealing his underlying panic. We are out of options. We literally have nowhere else to go tonight. The hotels are booked solid because of a convention downtown. We do not have the credit to sign a new lease anywhere in Davidson County. If you turn us away, we will be sleeping in our cars on the street. Tyler is trying a different angle. He is bypassing entitlement and aiming straight for guilt. He wants me to picture my elderly parents and my older sister shivering in a parking lot. He wants me to feel responsible for their physical safety. I look at the 4 of them standing in the fading evening light. I feel no guilt. I feel absolute clarity. Vivian taught me that real estate investing requires removing emotion from the equation. If you let a sob story sway your underwriting, you will lose the asset. The same principle applies to toxic family dynamics. If I let their self-inflicted crisis break my boundaries, I will lose my sanctuary. Sleeping in your cars is a consequence of your choices, I say calmly. It is not my responsibility to rescue you from the fallout of your own decisions. Jessica lets out a sharp, outraged gasp. Her eyes widen in genuine disbelief. How can you be so incredibly selfish, she demands. She stomps her foot on the cedar planks. You have 3 empty bedrooms sitting right behind you. You have a driveway big enough for our cars. It costs you absolutely nothing to let us stay here while we figure things out. You are just doing this to punish us. It is not about punishment, Jessica, I answer. It is about boundaries. This house is my private property. I do not allow people who disrespect me to sleep under my roof, regardless of shared DNA. Barbara steps forward again, closing the distance until she is barely an arm's length away. Her face contorts into an ugly mask of desperation and fury. The maternal facade drops entirely. You listen to me, Harriet, she hisses, her voice dripping with venom. You are going to open that door right now. You owe us. We raised you. We fed you. We put clothes on your back for 18 years. You do not get to shut us out when we need you the most. You will let us inside, or I swear to God, I will make sure everyone in this family knows what a heartless, greedy monster you have become. The threat is empty. The extended family cut ties with William and Barbara months ago when they started asking everyone for loans to cover the Brentwood mortgage. They have no audience left to weaponize. They are completely isolated. I do not owe you anything for raising me, I reply. My tone is frigid. Providing food and shelter to a minor is a legal requirement, not a loan that must be repaid with my adult assets. And you are welcome to tell whoever you want about my character. I do not care what anyone else thinks. William realizes the threats are useless. He realizes the guilt trips are failing. He attempts a final desperate maneuver, combining authority with a forced compromise. Fine, he barks, throwing his hands up in exasperation. We will not stay for free. We will pay you rent. As soon as Tyler gets a new consulting contract, we will back pay you for every single night we stay here. We will sign a document right now if it makes you feel better. Just give us the keys to the guest rooms. A verbal promise of future rent from a family with multiple active judgments against them is mathematically worthless. It is a terrible deal structure. But the offer itself reveals the core of the issue. They still refuse to acknowledge the fundamental reality of their situation. They still believe they have leverage to negotiate. They need to hear the unvarnished truth. They need to understand exactly why their promises are empty and why I will never trust them again. It is time to strip away the last remaining layers of their denial. I cross my arms, matching William's earlier posture. I look at him with a steady, unwavering gaze. You are going to pay me rent, I ask. The question hangs in the air, sharp and mocking. Yes, William answers quickly, nodding his head. We will pay you fair market value. We just need time. I let out a slow, deliberate breath. I am preparing to pull back the curtain on the deepest, darkest secret I have kept hidden for months. The conflict is about to escalate beyond a porch argument. It is about to become a devastating public reckoning. Explain to me exactly how you plan to pay rent, Dad, I say. My voice is quiet, forcing the 4 of them to lean in closer to hear me. Explain to me how you intend to write a check when your retirement accounts are empty and your home equity line of credit has defaulted. The color drains from William's face for the second time this evening. He stares at me, his jaw going completely slack. Explain to me, I continue, turning my gaze to Jessica and Tyler, how a couple with $90,000 in unsecured credit card debt and a repossessed vehicle plans to cover a monthly lease. Explain to me how any of you plan to finance a new life when your entire financial foundation was liquidated on the courthouse steps. The silence returns heavier and darker than before. I have just crossed a massive invisible line. I am not supposed to know these details. The family rule is to keep the toxic secrets buried deep, pretending the facade is still intact. By laying out their specific debts and defaults, I am violating the core principle of their existence. I am forcing them to look at the ugly ruin they created. The ultimate trapdoor is about to spring open beneath their feet. The mention of the home equity line of credit lands like a physical blow. The specific, precise nature of my words strips away their ability to deflect. I am not speaking in vague generalities about hard times or the economy. I am speaking the language of actual debt instruments and public filings. I am demonstrating that I possess granular knowledge of their collapse. William stares at me. His mouth opens and closes twice before he manages to form a sentence. How he asks. His voice is weak, raspy, and devoid of its usual booming authority. How do you know about the line of credit? We did not tell anyone about that. I do not answer the question. I do not owe them an explanation of my methods. Vivian taught me early in my real estate career that silence is a powerful negotiation tool. When you hold the leverage, you force the other party to fill the empty space. You force them to articulate their own weakness. I maintain my neutral stance on the porch. I let the silence stretch out, forcing William to sit with the crushing weight of exposure. I demand that you explain exactly why you are standing on my driveway with garbage bags, I state. My voice is firm and uncompromising. If you want me to even consider your request for shelter, you will articulate the exact series of events that brought you here. I want the truth, William. No evasions. No blaming the market. Tell me what you did. The use of his first name strikes a nerve. It signals a complete removal of the daughter-parent dynamic. We are operating strictly as autonomous adults, standing on equal ground. Barbara attempts to intervene, her maternal instinct flaring up in defense of her husband. Hattie, stop this right now, she scolds, her tone shrill. You are interrogating your father like he is a criminal. It is none of your business how our finances were arranged. We hit a rough patch. That is all you need to know. It is my business the moment you expect me to subsidize your survival, I counter. My gaze remains locked on William, ignoring Barbara's outburst. You demanded I open my doors. Now I am demanding the full accounting of your failure. Explain it. William looks at Barbara, then at Jessica. He realizes the old tactics of deflection and bluster will not work against the cold reality of my knowledge. He lowers his head, staring down at the cedar planks beneath his worn shoes. The facade of the proud, financially savvy patriarch crumbles completely. He takes a shaky breath. His shoulders sag deeply. It started with the Brentwood house, he begins. His voice is barely a murmur. We co-signed the primary mortgage for Jessica and Tyler 3 years ago. We wanted them to have a beautiful start. We thought Tyler's consulting business was going to take off. Tyler shifts uncomfortably, shuffling his feet on the concrete driveway. He looks away, unable to meet my eyes. But the business did not take off. William continues. Tyler lost his biggest client 6 months after closing. They burned through their savings trying to maintain the mortgage payments. When they ran out of cash, they came to us. We could not let them default. It would have ruined their credit. The profound irony of his statement hangs in the humid air. He was terrified of ruining their credit, so he sacrificed his own. It is the classic fatal flaw of an enabler. They will set themselves on fire to keep the golden child warm. So you took out a line of credit on the house you spent 30 years paying off, I supply, filling in the blanks. You drained $350,000 of your own equity to float a sinking luxury estate you did not even live in. William nods slowly. A single bead of sweat rolls down his temple. We thought it was a temporary bridge loan, he mutters. We thought Jessica would find a high-paying corporate job to replace Tyler's income. We just needed to buy them some time. Jessica instantly bristles at the implication that she was responsible for replacing the income. She steps forward, her posture rigid and defensive. Do not put this all on me, Dad, she snaps. Her voice is loud and abrasive, piercing the quiet confession. It was not my fault the tech sector crashed. I applied for dozens of executive positions, but the hiring market was completely frozen, and Tyler was supposed to be securing new contracts. I cannot be expected to carry the entire household while he sits around networking at coffee shops. She throws her husband under the bus without a moment's hesitation. The golden child refuses to carry an ounce of blame. She expects the world to cater to her status, and when the world fails to deliver, she points a finger at the closest target. Tyler whips his head around, glaring at his wife. Networking at coffee shops, he repeats, his tone thick with resentment. I was hustling every single day, Jessica. You were the one refusing to cut back on the lifestyle expenses. I begged you to cancel the country club membership and return the leased sport utility vehicle. You told me it would look bad for our image if we downsized. You racked up $90,000 in credit card debt buying designer bags and imported furniture while I was trying to save the business. The driveway erupts into a vicious, chaotic shouting match. The pristine image of the successful power couple disintegrates right in front of me. Jessica screams at Tyler, calling him a failure and a loser. Tyler yells back, recounting specific luxury purchases and missed minimum payments. They air their ugliest resentments, attacking each other with ruthless precision. Barbara tries to play referee, stepping between them with frantic hand gestures. "Stop it, both of you," she pleads. "Keep your voices down. The neighbors are going to hear us." Even in the midst of total financial ruin, Barbara's primary concern is maintaining appearances for strangers. She is terrified of public judgment. She prioritizes the illusion of stability over confronting the actual crisis. I watch the meltdown with clinical detachment. The contrast is staggering. 3 years ago, they sat at a mahogany dining table, mocking my careful financial planning. They called my caution slow and my frugality embarrassing. Now they are screaming at each other on my driveway, surrounded by garbage bags, while I stand silently on the porch of a fully paid-off asset I acquired through the exact discipline they ridiculed. William raises his voice, attempting to regain control of his fractured family. "Enough," he bellows, shutting down the argument. "Pointing fingers will not fix the immediate problem." He turns back to me, his expression hollowed out by defeat. "The interest rates on the credit line adjusted upward," he confesses. "We were bleeding cash every month. We drained our retirement accounts trying to keep up with the payments on both properties. We emptied the savings. We emptied the emergency fund. When the cash ran out, the bank filed the notices of default." He stops talking. He has reached the end of the timeline. He has articulated the sequence of catastrophic decisions that wiped out decades of stability in 36 months. He has admitted total ruin. "And then the bank foreclosed," I state, summarizing the final chapter. "They auctioned your home on the courthouse steps." Barbara lets out a sudden, jagged sob. She presses both hands to her face. "It was horrific, Hattie," she wails. "The sheriff deputies showed up last week and gave us exactly 1 hour to pack our belongings. They treated us like common criminals. We had to leave the photo albums and the good crystal behind." She looks up at me, her eyes wide with a frantic, pleading intensity. "A heartless corporate conglomerate bought our house at the auction," she cries. "Some faceless vulture capital company swooped in and stole our home from right under us. They did not even give us a chance to negotiate a short sale. They just filed an eviction notice and threw us out onto the street without a shred of human decency." The phrase "heartless corporate conglomerate" echoes across the cedar planks. The deep irony of her accusation is a brilliant twisting knife. She believes she is the victim of a ruthless capitalist machine. She believes a shadowy entity destroyed her life. William nods in grim agreement. "The system is entirely broken," he mutters. "These hedge funds buy up distressed properties and toss working-class families into the gutter. There is no morality left in the real estate market, Harriet. You are lucky you bought this small place before the corporations took over the entire city. They are comforting themselves with a false narrative. They are convinced that an anonymous giant crushed them, absolving them of the final responsibility. They think they were merely unlucky casualties of an aggressive market cycle. They have laid all their cards on the table. They have confessed their incompetence, blamed each other for the spending, and blamed an invisible corporation for the final eviction. They have exposed the deep, rotting core of their entitlement. The stage is perfectly set. The trapdoor is fully primed. I look at Barbara. I look at William. I look at Jessica and Tyler standing amid their plastic trash bags. I take a slow, measured breath, savoring the final moments of their delusion. I reach into the side pocket of my leather work tote one more time. I bypass the folded warranty deed and locate a small, sleek business card case. I snap the magnetic closure open and slide out a single premium heavy stock card. The raised black lettering catches the ambient light of the street lamps. I step forward, closing the distance between myself and Barbara. She watches me with a mixture of confusion and desperate hope, assuming I am finally offering a lifeline. I hold the business card out between 2 fingers. I do not hand it to her directly. I let it drop. The heavy card flutters down and lands squarely on top of the nearest battered canvas suitcase. "I suggest you read the name of that heartless corporate conglomerate very carefully, Mother," I say. My voice is quiet, cold, and utterly devastating. The conflict is about to detonate. The premium heavy stock business card rests perfectly centered on the frayed fabric of Barbara's canvas suitcase. The raised black lettering catches the warm glow of the porch light. The evening air feels thick and motionless. The relentless hum of the cicadas creates a low, vibrating soundtrack to the unfolding scene. Barbara looks down at the card. She blinks rapidly, her brow furrowing in confusion. She does not immediately understand the gesture. Her mind is still trapped in the narrative of victimization, still clinging to the idea that an invisible enemy destroyed her life. She believes I am offering the contact information of a random property manager, or perhaps a cheap motel down the highway. She reaches out with a trembling hand and picks up the card. She holds it up to the light, squinting to read the precise, elegant font. William leans over her shoulder, peering at the small rectangle of paper. Jessica stops mid-complaint and steps closer, her curiosity overriding her frustration. Even Tyler shuffles forward, drawn by the sudden shift in the atmosphere. The entire family gathers around the tiny piece of evidence, attempting to decipher its meaning. I stand silently on the elevated porch steps, watching them process the information. I have spent the last 3 years operating in absolute anonymity. I built a corporate shield to protect my assets and my peace of mind. I learned early in my real estate career that blending into the background is a massive tactical advantage. When nobody knows who controls the capital, nobody knows where to aim the target. But tonight, the shield is no longer necessary. Tonight, the anonymity transforms into the ultimate weapon. Barbara's eyes scan the first line of text. Her lips move silently, forming the syllables of my name. Harriet Dawson. She skips down to the second line. Founder and Chief Executive Officer. A small, puzzled frown crosses her face. She looks up at me, holding the card between her thumb and forefinger. "I do not understand, Hattie," she mutters. "Why are you giving me your business card? What does this have to do with our eviction?" I do not say a word. I maintain my flat, emotionless expression. I simply nod my head toward the card, indicating she needs to finish reading the text. Barbara lowers her gaze back to the paper. She reads the final line printed in bold, sharp lettering at the very bottom. Southern Roots Holdings Limited Liability Company. The silence that crashes down on the driveway is heavier than concrete. It is not the stunned quiet that followed the revelation of my paid-off house. That was mere surprise at my financial competence. This silence is entirely different. It is the deafening, terrifying vacuum that occurs when a foundational reality is ripped out from underneath a person's feet. Barbara stops breathing. Her chest freezes mid-inhalation. The color drains from her face with such velocity that her skin appears instantly translucent. Her mouth drops open, a small, silent gasp escaping her throat. The business card slips from her trembling fingers and flutters back down onto the suitcase, landing face up in the fading light. William stares at the card. He looks from the bold black text to my face, then back to the text again. The cognitive gears in his mind grind to a violent halt. The connection forms a brutal short circuit in his brain. "Southern Roots Holdings," he whispers. His voice is hollow, stripped of any remaining dignity or authority. The words sound like ash scraping against dry stone. "Southern Roots Holdings." "Yes," I state. My voice is calm, clinical, and utterly devastating. "The faceless corporate conglomerate that bought your house at auction. The Vulture Capital Company that filed the detainer warrant. The entity that sent the sheriff to change the locks. That was me." The realization hits them with the force of a physical blow. The psychological impact is visible. William stumbles backward a full step, his hands dropping limply to his sides. His knees appear to buckle slightly under the weight of the revelation. Barbara clutches her chest, leaning heavily against the rusted sedan to keep herself upright. They are not processing a mere real estate transaction. They are processing a fundamental shift in the universe. They threw me out assuming I was weak and incapable. They assumed I would vanish into obscurity. Instead, I built a financial engine powerful enough to consume the very foundation of their arrogance. I did not just succeed independently. I legally and financially own the ruins of their catastrophic failure. I hold the deed to the ground where they used to stand and mock my ambitions. Jessica lets out a short, sharp laugh. It is a sound of pure, unadulterated panic. She cannot integrate the information into her worldview. It shatters the rigid hierarchy she relies on to validate her existence. "No," she says, shaking her head violently. "No, that is impossible. That cannot be true. You are lying, Hattie. You are just trying to mess with our heads because you are still bitter about Thanksgiving. You do not have the kind of money required to buy a house at a public auction. It requires hundreds of thousands in certified cash. You are a rookie real estate agent. You are faking this." She is desperately attempting to reconstruct her shattered reality. She is clinging to the old narrative where I am the slow, impoverished scapegoat playing a cruel prank. I do not break eye contact with my sister. I reach back into my leather tote and pull out a sleek manila folder. I slide out a single sheet of paper and hold it up. This is the recorded trustee's deed from the Davidson County foreclosure auction, I explain. My tone is the same patient, measured cadence I use when explaining basic contract terms to a difficult client. It officially transfers the title of the property located at your parents' address to Southern Roots Holdings. And as you can see by the corporate registry documents attached, I am the sole registered agent and primary managing member of that entity. I lower the paper. The transaction was fully funded and closed in 4 minutes on the courthouse steps. I wired the exact payoff amount directly to the credit union. I own the house, Jessica, legally, ethically, and entirely. Tyler runs a hand through his messy hair. He lets out a low whistle of sheer disbelief. He looks at me with an expression that borders on fearful respect. "You bought your own parents' house out from under them," he mutters. "That is ruthless. That is absolutely ruthless." I pivot my gaze toward Tyler, shutting down his accusation instantly. "I did not buy it out from under them, Tyler," I correct him sharply. "The bank bought it out from under them because you and Jessica drained their equity to fund a lifestyle you could not afford. The bank liquidated the asset because William and Barbara failed to make their mandatory payments. The bank took the property. I simply purchased an undervalued asset at a public forum after the damage was already done. I did not cause the ruin. I merely acquired the wreckage." Barbara finally finds her voice. It is a high-pitched, hysterical keen. She pushes herself away from the sedan and takes 2 erratic steps toward the porch. "You evicted us!" she screams. The volume of her voice startles a dog barking 2 houses down the street. Her eyes are wide and completely wild. "You sent armed deputies to our front door. You forced us to pack our entire lives into these garbage bags. You watched us sleep in this car, knowing you held the keys the entire time. How could you do something so unspeakably evil to your own mother? The hypocrisy is staggering. The woman screaming about maternal bonds and unspeakable evil is the exact same woman who packed my belongings into garbage bags when I was a teenager. The woman demanding empathy is the exact same woman who watched my father lock the deadbolt on a cold November night and never bothered to check if I had a warm place to sleep. I did not evict my mother," I reply, my voice dropping to a quiet, dangerous register. "I evicted a defaulting occupant who was illegally holding over in a property owned by my corporation. I treated the transaction exactly as the law dictates. I removed emotion from the equation entirely. I treated you with the exact same cold, clinical detachment you showed me 3 years ago." William steps forward, his face contorting into an ugly mask of pure, unbridled rage. The shock is wearing off rapidly, replaced by the explosive fury of a cornered narcissist whose ultimate failure has been exposed. He cannot tolerate the humiliation of being defeated by the child he deemed worthless. "You planned this," he roars, pointing a shaking finger directly at my face. "You stalked us. You waited for us to slip up so you could steal our home and humiliate us. You are a vindictive, scheming monster. You intentionally destroyed this family to feed your own massive ego." He lunges toward the porch stairs, his fists clenched tightly at his sides. The physical threat is palpable. He intends to use his size and his aggression to intimidate me into submission. He wants to force me to surrender the property by sheer brute force. The boundaries of the conflict have just shattered completely. The confrontation is no longer a verbal debate over family obligations. It is rapidly escalating into a highly volatile physical altercation. They realize their ruin is absolute and irreversible, and they realize I profited legally from their staggering incompetence. The meltdown is imminent, and I must prepare to defend my sanctuary. The porch light flickers slightly, casting sharp, angular shadows across the faces of my family. The heavy silence that followed my revelation shatters into a million jagged pieces. The driveway erupts. It is a primal, chaotic explosion of fury, shame, and total panic. They have collided with the impenetrable wall of reality, and the impact is devastating. William hits the first step of the porch. His heavy boots slam against the cedar planks. The wood groans under his weight. He does not stop. He takes the second step, closing the distance between us until I can smell the stale coffee and bitter desperation on his breath. "You are going to fix this," he roars. The veins on his neck bulge, pressing against his collar. "You are going to call your lawyers right now and reverse that auction. You are going to sign that deed back over to me immediately. Do you hear me, Harriet? I am your father, and I am ordering you to return my property." I do not step back. I anchor my feet firmly, refusing to yield an inch of ground. "I cannot return a property you lost to the bank, Dad," I state. My voice remains cold and level. "I did not steal your house. You surrendered it when you stopped making the minimum payments on your home equity line. The bank foreclosed on your debt. They legally seized the asset. I simply purchased the title from the bank at a public forum. It is a clean transaction. There is nothing to reverse." Barbara lets out a piercing shriek. She claws at her own hair, her carefully maintained maternal facade disintegrating into pure hysteria. "It is our legacy," she wails. Her voice is shrill, cracking with genuine agony. "We built that house. We raised our children there. You cannot just swoop in like a vulture and steal our family history. You knew we were struggling. You knew we were drowning, and you sat in the dark waiting to pick the bones clean. You are an evil, vindictive sociopath." Her accusations ring hollow in the muggy Tennessee air. The woman screaming about family legacy is the exact same woman who mocked my ambitions at the Thanksgiving table. She values the physical structure of a house far more than the daughter she banished from it. "I did not wait for you to drown, Barbara," I correct her calmly. "I built my own life. You chose to tie an anchor around your ankles and jump into the deep end. I just happened to be standing on the shore when you finally sank. The bank was going to sell that property to a developer who would have bulldozed it the next day. I preserved the structure. It was purely an ethical business decision based on the zoning potential and the current market comparables." Jessica shoves Tyler out of the way. She marches up the driveway, her designer tote swinging aggressively from her shoulder. The frantic energy she displayed earlier has curdled into a vicious, entitled rage. The golden child cannot tolerate a reality where the scapegoat holds the keys to the kingdom. "You are going to sign a quitclaim deed, Hattie," she demands. She points a trembling, manicured finger directly at my chest. "You are going to transfer the title back to Mom and Dad right now. It is the only moral thing to do. You used dirty legal tricks to steal their equity, and we are not going to let you get away with it. If you do not sign it over, I swear I will sue you for fraud. I will drag your little fake corporation into court and expose everything you did." The threat is laughable. It reveals a staggering ignorance of basic civil law. Jessica is threatening to sue me for fraud because I legally purchased a foreclosed asset at a public auction her parents failed to prevent. She is grasping at non-existent legal straws to reassert her dominance. "You cannot sue someone for participating in a public auction," Jessica, I explain. My tone is the identical patient cadence I use to reject lowball offers from inexperienced buyers. Southern Roots Holdings followed every statutory requirement outlined in the Tennessee Code. We submitted the winning bid. We provided certified funds. The trustee recorded the deed with the county clerk. It is an ironclad transfer of ownership. Your threat of litigation is entirely baseless." Jessica snarls, her face contorting into an ugly sneer. "You think you are so smart?" she hisses. "You think just because you memorized a few real estate laws you are suddenly better than us. You are still just the slow, stupid girl who could not pass algebra. You just got lucky." The insult glances off me without leaving a mark. 3 years ago, that comment would have crushed my spirit. It would have sent me spiraling into a deep well of self-doubt. But standing on my paid-off porch holding the leverage to their entire future, the insult feels pathetic. It is the desperate flailing of a drowning narcissist. "I did not get lucky, Jessica," I reply softly. "I got disciplined. I spent 3 years studying foreclosure timelines and distressed debt analysis while you were maxing out credit cards to furnish a house you could not afford. I built a profitable portfolio while you bankrupted our parents to maintain your illusion of wealth. You are standing here surrounded by plastic garbage bags demanding I surrender my assets because you refuse to accept the consequences of your own staggering financial stupidity." Tyler lets out a low groan from the bottom of the driveway. He covers his face with both hands, rubbing his eyes in exhaustion. He is witnessing the total dismantling of his wife's superiority complex. He is realizing the depths of the delusion he married into. William refuses to accept defeat. The logic and the legal facts bounce off his impenetrable arrogance. He steps up to the top stair, invading my personal space entirely. His chest is inches from mine. I do not care about the legal facts he spits. Drops of saliva hit my cheek. I care about what is right. You are my daughter. You will respect my authority. You will fix this mess right now, or you will face the consequences. He raises his right hand, forming a tight fist. He holds it hovering near his waist, a silent physical threat designed to force compliance. He believes he can still bully me into submission, using the sheer terror of physical intimidation. The conflict has reached its absolute peak. The verbal arguments have failed. The emotional manipulation has failed. The guilt trips have been neutralized by cold, hard logic. The family realizes their ruin is absolute, irreversible, and completely self-inflicted. They realize I profited legally and ethically from their collapse, and they cannot handle the humiliation. The meltdown is cresting toward a dangerous, violent eruption, and I must draw the final, unbreakable boundary. William stands on the top step of the porch. His heavy breathing is the loudest sound in the humid night. The distance between us is practically non-existent. I can see the deep lines of exhaustion and rage etched around his eyes. He is vibrating with a dangerous, unpredictable energy. The realization that he possesses zero leverage over me has pushed him past the edge of rational thought. His right hand remains clenched in a fist, hovering near his waist. It is a calculated intimidation tactic. He has used his physical size to control our household for decades, relying on the unspoken threat of violence to silence any dissent. He expects me to shrink back. He expects the ingrained fear of his temper to override my logic. I do not blink. I do not take a single step backward. I maintain eye contact, locking my gaze directly onto his bloodshot eyes. "If you think I'm going to walk away from my own property, you are out of your mind," he growls. His voice drops into a gravelly, menacing register. "You owe me that house. I paid the original mortgage. I put the roof on that structure. I am not going to let some ungrateful little brat steal my life work on a technicality." He leans forward, jutting his chin toward my face. "We are moving inside right now," he declares. "We are taking the master bedroom. We are taking the guest rooms. We are going to live here until you sort out this ridiculous legal mess and sign the deed back to me. If you try to lock that door, I will kick it down. Try and stop me, Harriet. I dare you." The threat is explicit. He is promising to destroy my physical property to establish dominance. He plans to force entry and squat in my sanctuary, daring me to escalate the situation. Barbara nods vigorously from the bottom of the stairs. Her face is pale and streaked with smeared makeup, but her entitlement remains fully intact. "That is right, William," she shouts. "We are not leaving. This is family property. She cannot keep us out. We have a right to be here." Jessica crosses her arms, smirking triumphantly. She believes her father has successfully reasserted control. "You heard him, Hattie," she sneers. "Move out of the way. We are exhausted, and I am not sleeping in that humid car for another night." The family dynamic has reverted to its primal state. They are attempting a hostile physical takeover, relying on sheer brute force to bypass my boundaries. They believe the rules of the outside world do not apply to them because we share DNA. They believe family ties grant them immunity from consequences. It is time to shatter that delusion permanently. I slide my hand slowly into the front pocket of my denim jeans. I withdraw my smartphone. The screen illuminates, casting a cool blue glow across my face. I deliberately tap the keypad, pressing the numbers 91 and 1. I do not press the green call button. I hold the device up, maintaining my thumb directly over the screen, hovering millimeters away from initiating the connection. I look at William. My expression is entirely devoid of emotion. I am projecting the cold, unyielding authority of a property owner defending an asset. "Take one more step toward my front door, Dad," I state. My voice is quiet, but the authority cuts through the thick summer air like a razor. "Take one step, and I will press this button. I will inform the dispatcher that 4 hostile individuals are trespassing on my private estate and threatening to break down my door." William stares at the glowing screen. His fist twitches, but he does not move forward. The sudden introduction of law enforcement disrupts his momentum. He is accustomed to bullying a compliant daughter. He is not prepared to confront armed deputies. "You would not dare," he spits, his confidence wavering slightly. "You would not call the cops on your own father. You would not subject this family to that kind of public humiliation. The neighbors would see everything." "I am not concerned about the neighbors," I reply, keeping my thumb steady over the screen. "I am concerned about securing my perimeter. You are currently standing on a parcel of land registered to Harriet Dawson. You are uninvited guests. In the state of Tennessee, property owners have robust legal protections against criminal trespass and forced entry. If you attempt to kick down that door, you will be arrested for vandalism and breaking and entering. Jessica lets out a dramatic scoff, rolling her eyes. "Oh, please," she mocks. "Stop acting like a lawyer, Hattie. The police are not going to arrest an elderly couple for trying to find shelter with their daughter. It is a domestic dispute. They will tell you to work it out." The ignorance is staggering. The golden child truly believes the justice system will bend to accommodate her entitlement. She believes her status grants her an invisible shield against legal accountability. I shift my gaze to Jessica, my eyes narrowing slightly. "You are severely misinformed," I correct her. "This is not a domestic dispute. You do not reside at this address. You receive no mail here. You have no legal tenancy. To the police officers responding to this call, you are merely hostile strangers attempting to force entry into a private residence. They will not ask us to work it out. They will remove you in handcuffs." Barbara gasps, pressing a hand to her chest. She takes a staggering step backward, horrified by the brutal clinical nature of my warning. "You cannot do this," she wails. "We are your parents. You have a moral obligation to care for us. The law cannot force a child to abandon her own flesh and blood on the street." Her plea is a desperate attempt to weaponize morality. She is trying to bind me with a sense of duty she never demonstrated herself. "There is no moral obligation, Barbara," I counter. My voice drops colder than ice. "And there is certainly no legal obligation. Tennessee is not a filial responsibility state. The state government does not require adult children to financially support or house their destitute parents. You have no legal right to me. You have no legal right to my bank accounts. You have no legal right to my physical assets. You are entirely on your own." The statement hangs in the air, stripping away the final layer of their delusion. The hard legal boundary is established. It is an impenetrable fortress constructed from statutes and property rights. The family dispute has been transformed into a stark legal reality where their demands hold absolutely zero weight. Tyler slowly backs away from the porch stairs. He holds his hands up in a gesture of surrender. The panic is evident in his wide, darting eyes. "Look, William." Tyler stammers, his voice trembling. "We need to back down. She is serious. She will make the call. We cannot afford to catch criminal charges right now. We do not have the money to post bail. A trespassing arrest will ruin my background checks for any future consulting gigs. We need to leave." Tyler is the first one to crack. His self-preservation instinct overrides the family loyalty. He recognizes the concrete wall they have hit, and he is terrified of the consequences. He understands that I am not playing a game. I am demonstrating absolute resolve. William glares at Tyler, his face contorting with disgust. "Coward," he snarls. "You are a spineless coward. You are going to let this little brat dictate terms to us. You are going to run away because she is holding a phone. I am running away because she holds the deed." William Tyler shoots back, his frustration finally boiling over. "She owns the house. She owns your house. She holds all the cards. We have nothing. We are standing here arguing over property we have zero claim to. It is over." The truth spoken aloud by his own son-in-law shatters William's remaining defiance. The aggressive posture collapses. His shoulders sag deeply. He lowers his clenched fist, uncurling his fingers slowly. The fight drains out of him, leaving behind a hollow, exhausted shell of a man. He looks at me, the daughter he banished 3 years ago. He sees the glowing screen of my phone. He sees the unyielding determination in my eyes. He finally understands that the power dynamic has permanently shifted. I am no longer the subordinate child desperate for his approval. I am the landlord, and I control the gates to the sanctuary. "Fine," he mutters, his voice thick with defeat. He turns away, breaking eye contact. "We will leave. We will sleep in the car again. I hope you are happy, Harriet. I hope you can sleep peacefully in your big empty house, knowing your mother is suffering out in the heat." He attempts a final weak guilt trip as he descends the porch stairs. It is a pathetic maneuver devoid of any real power. Barbara follows him, sobbing loudly into her hands. She does not look back at me. She shuffles toward the rusted sedan, her shoulders shaking with dramatic grief. Jessica stands frozen on the driveway, staring at the cedar planks with a look of pure, bewildered shock. She cannot comprehend the magnitude of their defeat. They are turning away. They are preparing to retreat to their vehicles and face the grim reality of homelessness. The conflict has reached its absolute resolution. The boundary holds firm. But I am not finished. They need shelter, and I am a property investor. I have an asset to deploy, but it will be deployed strictly on my terms, establishing a new permanent hierarchy. The heavy, humid air hangs motionless over the driveway. William reaches the rusted handle of the sedan, pulling the door open with a dull, mechanical groan. Barbara stands beside him, her shoulders shaking with dramatic, performative sobs. Tyler paces nervously near the back bumper, while Jessica crosses her arms, staring at the concrete in stunned silence. The threat of an armed police response has completely shattered their rebellion. They are broken, utterly stripped of their entitlement, standing on the pavement with absolutely nowhere to go. I watch them prepare to climb back into the suffocating heat of their vehicle. My thumb remains hovering over the phone screen. The boundary is secure. My sanctuary is protected. I have won the standoff. A typical daughter might have felt a rush of crushing guilt, watching her elderly parents retreat to a car. I feel only the cold, analytical clarity Vivian instilled in me during my first year of real estate training. I lower my phone. I slip it back into my pocket. "Stop," I command. My voice rings out crisp and commanding. William freezes his hand, resting on the top of the open car door. Barbara stops mid-sob, turning her head slowly to look at me. Jessica and Tyler look up, a sudden desperate glimmer of hope sparking in their eyes. They assume I have broken. They believe the guilt finally overwhelmed me, and I am about to offer them the master bedroom. I step off the porch, walking down the concrete path, until I am standing 10 feet away from the sedan. I maintain a safe physical distance, keeping my posture straight and authoritative. I am not offering you a room in my home. I clarify, instantly extinguishing the spark of hope in Jessica's eyes. You will never cross the threshold of this house, but I am a property investor, and I currently have a vacant asset in my portfolio. I will offer you one single non-negotiable option for shelter. William lets go of the car door, turning fully to face me. The defiance is entirely gone from his posture. He looks like a man dying of thirst, being offered a single drop of water. "What kind of option?" he asks, his voice rough and hesitant. "I own a duplex on the east side of town," I explain. "It is not located in a premium neighborhood. The finishes are builder grade and the square footage is modest. The previous tenant moved out yesterday, and my cleaning crew finished turning the unit over this afternoon. It is empty. It is available. And I am willing to offer you a standard 12-month lease." Barbara gasps, pressing her hands together in a gesture of prayer. "Oh, Hattie," she breathes, her voice thick with sudden, overwhelming relief. "Thank you. Thank you so much, sweetheart. We knew you would not let us sleep on the street. We knew you had a good heart. We will take it. We will move in tonight." She takes a step forward, preparing to close the distance and wrap me in a maternal embrace. "Do not move," I warn her, raising a single hand to halt her approach. "You need to hear the terms before you start packing your bags. This is not a family favor, Barbara. This is a strictly commercial transaction." Barbara stops, her smile faltering slightly. The use of her first name reinforces the massive invisible wall between us. "The lease agreement is for 12 months. I state, my tone devoid of any familial warmth. "The rent is set at current market rate, $1,800 a month, due on the first calendar day. There are no family discounts. There are no grace periods. There are no free rides." William swallows hard. His Adam's apple bobs nervously in his throat. 1,800, he repeats. The number clearly terrifies him. "Hattie, we just told you we lost everything. Our retirement accounts are empty. Our credit is destroyed. How are we supposed to afford market rent? You both have fixed monthly pension deposits," I reply, citing the financial details I discovered during my deep dive into their public records. "Combined, your guaranteed income is roughly $4,000 a month. That means your rent-to-income ratio is below 50%. You can afford the unit if you adhere to a strict budget. You will simply have to cancel the country club memberships and stop shopping at premium grocers. You will have to live exactly like the people you used to mock." Jessica lets out a sharp, indignant scoff. She places her hands on her hips, stepping forward to challenge my authority. "Are you seriously going to charge your own parents full price for a cheap duplex?" she demands. "You own the property outright. You do not even have a mortgage on it. You are just being incredibly greedy. You are trying to squeeze blood from a stone." I pivot my gaze to Jessica, fixing her with a stare cold enough to freeze water. I am running a business, Jessica, I correct her. My operating costs include property taxes, insurance, maintenance reserves, and capital expenditures. I do not subsidize housing for anyone. If you feel my terms are greedy, you are absolutely welcome to secure alternative accommodations for them tonight. Do you have a spare bedroom in your luxury sport utility vehicle? Jessica opens her mouth to argue, but the words die in her throat. She has zero capital and zero leverage. She cannot rescue them, so she has no right to dictate the terms of my rescue. She crosses her arms and looks away, fuming in impotent rage. I turn my attention back to William, detailing the final, crushing conditions of the offer. You will be required to sign a digital lease agreement before I hand over the lockbox code, I continue. The contract contains a strict 3-day eviction clause. If your rent is not deposited into my corporate portal by the 3rd day of the month, my attorney will automatically file a detainer warrant. I will not call to remind you. I will not listen to excuses about delayed pension checks. I will evict you with the exact same clinical efficiency the bank used last week. William stares at me. The reality of the subjugation is sinking in. I am stripping him of all parental authority. I am reducing him to the legal status of a subordinate tenant entirely dependent on my mercy. He is facing the ultimate humiliation. The father who demanded absolute obedience from his children must now sign a contract binding him to the strict rules of the daughter he banished. And there is one final condition, I add, raising my voice slightly to ensure the entire group hears the decree. William and Barbara look at me, waiting for the final blow. This lease is strictly limited to 2 occupants, I declare. My eyes sweep over Jessica and Tyler, making my intention unmistakably clear. Jessica and Tyler are expressly forbidden from occupying the unit. They are not permitted to sleep on the couch. They are not permitted to park their vehicles in the driveway overnight. If I discover they have moved in, I will consider it a material breach of the lease, and I will terminate your tenancy immediately. The driveway erupts into a fresh wave of chaotic panic. The final condition is a surgical strike designed to sever the toxic dependency that caused their ruin in the first place. I am forcing William and Barbara to finally cut the umbilical cord to the golden child. You cannot do that, Jessica screams, her voice cracking with pure, unadulterated terror. She realizes she is being formally excluded from the only available lifeboat. You cannot separate us. We are a family. Where are Tyler and I supposed to go? We have no money. We have no home. You cannot just leave us on the street. I look at my older sister, the woman who smirked while my father kicked me out of the house. The woman who spent years mocking my deliberate, careful approach to life. That sounds like a personal problem, Jessica. I state, my tone completely flat. I suggest you call the luxury leasing company that repossessed your car and ask if they have any available couches. You are an adult. Figure it out. Tyler grabs Jessica's arm, pulling her back. He looks defeated, recognizing the absolute finality of my decision. Stop yelling, Jess, he mutters. She is not going to change her mind. We have to go. We have to find a motel before it gets too late. William looks from his panicked golden child to the rusted sedan, then back to me. The internal conflict is visible on his face. He is torn between his lifelong habit of enabling Jessica and the immediate terrifying reality of his own homelessness. He knows he cannot save her. He knows if he refuses my offer, he and Barbara will be sleeping in a humid parking lot. The stakes are total, absolute subjugation. I have offered them survival, but the cost is their pride, their authority, and their preferred family dynamic. They must publicly accept my dominance to secure a roof over their heads. I cross my arms and wait. I do not rush the decision. I allow the heavy, humid silence to press down on them. The cicadas buzz loudly in the background. The streetlights cast long, harsh shadows across the concrete. I hold the keys to their future, and I am demanding they surrender their past to get them. The quiet on this driveway is agonizing. It is a thick, suffocating stillness that settles over the concrete while William and Barbara stare at me. I have laid out the terms of their survival with absolute clarity. The offer is entirely conditional. It strips away every ounce of their remaining dignity. They must abandon the golden child. They must submit to the authority of the scapegoat. They must sign a legally binding contract that reduces them from powerful parents to highly regulated tenants. William breathes heavily, his chest rising and falling in rapid, shallow movements. He looks at his rusted sedan, then at the dark sky above. He is a man who spent his entire life commanding obedience through sheer volume and intimidation. He always assumed he held the ultimate veto power in our family hierarchy. To accept my terms means acknowledging a total irreversible defeat. He shifts his gaze to Jessica. The golden child is glaring at him, her eyes wide with a frantic, demanding energy. She expects him to reject the offer on principle. She expects him to defend the family unit and insist they all stick together, even if it means sleeping in a sweltering parking lot. William looks away from his favorite daughter. He cannot meet her eyes. The survival instinct finally overrides decades of toxic enabling. "We will take it," he says. His voice is barely above a whisper. It sounds like crushed glass. "We will sign the lease, Harriet. Just tell us what we need to do." Jessica lets out a sound that is half scream and half sob. Her perfectly curated world violently implodes on my driveway. "You cannot be serious," she shrieks, her voice echoing off the brick facades of the neighboring houses. "You are just going to abandon us. You are going to let her dictate who you can and cannot live with. You are letting her control you. You are choosing a cheap duplex over your own daughter." William finally turns to face her. His expression is hollowed out, exhausted beyond measure. "I do not have a choice, Jessica," he replies, his tone flat and defeated. "We do not have any money. We do not have any credit. If I say no to Harriet, your mother and I are sleeping on the street. I cannot fix this for you anymore. You are going to have to figure it out on your own." The abdication of his role as her savior is the final blow. Jessica realizes the well has completely run dry. The bank accounts are empty, the home equity is gone, and the limitless parental bailouts have officially ceased. She is a 31-year-old woman with massive unsecured debt, a repossessed car, and absolutely no safety net. She spins around facing Tyler, who is already walking toward the driver's side of their dust-covered luxury vehicle. "Get in the car!" "Tyler," she screams, her face contorted with rage. "We are leaving. I am not standing here and letting her humiliate us another second. We will find a hotel. We will call one of your old college buddies. We are getting out of this disgusting neighborhood right now." Tyler does not argue. He looks exhausted, relieved to finally escape the confrontation. He opens the door and slides into the driver's seat, starting the engine. The powerful motor roars to life, breaking the heavy silence of the night. Jessica grabs her designer leather tote from the pavement, slinging it aggressively over her shoulder. She glares at me one final time, her eyes burning with pure, unadulterated venom. "You think you won, Hattie," she hisses. "You think buying a few cheap houses makes you better than us. You are still just the bitter, jealous little girl you always were. Enjoy your empty life." She turns on her heel, marching toward the passenger side of the vehicle. She yanks the heavy door open and throws herself inside, slamming it shut with tremendous force. The sound rings out like a gunshot. Tyler shifts the vehicle into reverse. The tires squeal sharply against the asphalt. He backs out of the driveway, narrowly missing my mailbox. He throws the transmission into drive and hits the accelerator. The luxury sport utility vehicle speeds down the quiet residential street, its taillights disappearing into the dark, humid night. The golden child is gone, banished to a cheap motel, to finally face the consequences of her own reckless arrogance. I turn my attention back to William and Barbara. The driveway feels incredibly empty without Jessica's frantic energy. The old family hierarchy has been permanently dismantled. The toxic unit is fractured. I pull my smartphone from my pocket. I navigate to the digital property management portal I use for Southern Roots Holdings. I select the address for the vacant unit in the East Nashville duplex. I quickly populate the standard 12-month lease template, filling in their legal names and the agreed-upon monthly rental rate. I attach the strict 3-day eviction addendum and the specific clause prohibiting additional long-term occupants. I hold the phone out toward William. The lease is ready for digital signature, I inform him. My tone is strictly professional. I need a valid email address to send the document link. You will review the terms on your own device and apply your electronic signatures. Once the system confirms the signatures are complete, I will provide you with the access code for the electronic lockbox on the front door. William reaches into his pocket and pulls out a cracked, older model smartphone. He reads his email address aloud, his voice shaking slightly. I type the characters into the portal and hit send. A moment later, a soft chime emits from his device. He opens the email, tapping the link to access the legal contract. He walks over to the rusted sedan, resting his elbows on the hood of the car. He uses the warm metal surface as a makeshift desk. The street lamp overhead casts a pale yellow light, illuminating the deep wrinkles on his face. He scrolls through the dense legal text, reading the strict conditions that bind him to my authority. He is reading the physical manifestation of his total subjugation. Barbara stands beside him, peering over his shoulder. She looks at the screen, her face pale and drawn. The reality of their new life is staring back at them in stark black and white. They are no longer homeowners. They are tenants subject to the rules of the daughter they discarded. William reaches the bottom of the document. He uses his index finger to trace a shaky digital signature in the designated box. He hits the submit button. He hands the phone to Barbara. She hesitates for a fraction of a second, staring at the glowing screen before tracing her own name. She hits submit, handing the device back to her husband. My phone chimes quietly in my hand. The property management portal confirms the lease agreement is fully executed. The legal transaction is complete. I look at the screen, verifying the digital timestamps. I memorize the generated access code for the duplex lockbox. The access code for the front door is 4729. I state, my voice cutting through the stillness of the night. The property is located on Elmwood Avenue. You can input the address into your navigation system. The water and electricity are currently active under my corporate accounts. You have exactly 48 hours to transfer the utilities into your own names. If the utilities are not transferred by Thursday evening, I will order a service disconnect. William nods his head slowly. He does not argue. He does not attempt to negotiate an extension. The fight has been completely drained out of him. Understood, he mutters. We will take care of it tomorrow morning. He walks around the hood of the car, moving toward the driver's side door. His steps are slow and heavy. Barbara follows him, moving toward the passenger side. She opens the door and slides onto the worn fabric seat, pulling the heavy door shut behind her. She does not look out the window. She stares straight ahead into the darkness. William starts the engine of the rusted sedan. The motor sputters and coughs before settling into a loud, irregular idle. He shifts the car into reverse and backs slowly out of my driveway. He pauses for a brief second at the end of the curb, looking back toward the porch. He looks at me standing on the elevated cedar planks, bathed in the warm light of the fixture above my head. He is looking at the self-made millionaire he created through his own cruelty. He shifts the car into drive and slowly accelerates down the street, heading toward the cheap duplex across town. I stand on the porch, watching the taillights fade into the distance. The street grows quiet again. The cicadas resume their steady buzzing. The heavy, humid air feels suddenly lighter, cleaner. The toxic invasion has been repelled. My sanctuary remains untouched. The emotional climax of the evening washes over me. It is not a rush of vindictive joy. It is not a sudden explosion of triumphant happiness. It is a profound, deep-seated sense of absolute peace. The internal war of endurance that began 3 years ago on Thanksgiving night is officially over. The ghost of my parents' judgment has been permanently exorcised. I turn around, grasping the brass handle of my front door. I push the heavy wood open, stepping into the cool, air-conditioned quiet of my home. The hardwood floors gleam in the soft light of the hallway. The space smells of fresh paint and cleanliness. It is a fortress built entirely by my own hands, funded by my own discipline, and protected by my own boundaries. The story of the discarded daughter is finished. The story of the empowered property investor is just beginning. The final chapter of this conflict involves establishing the new normal, enforcing the boundaries, and finalizing the absolute severing of the past. The true test of my victory lies in the quiet aftermath of the storm. 6 months have passed since the rusted sedan backed out of my driveway and disappeared into the humid Nashville night. The oppressive heat of the summer has surrendered to the crisp, sharp chill of January. I sit at the large oak desk in my home office, holding a ceramic mug of dark roast coffee. The morning sun streams through the plantation shutters, casting long, bright rectangles across the hardwood floor. The house is perfectly quiet. It is a deep, restorative silence that I earned through 3 years of relentless, grueling labor. My laptop screen glows brightly, illuminating the open dashboard of the Southern Roots Holdings property management portal. I scan the rows of data with the practiced eye of a seasoned investor. The numbers tell a story of consistent, steady growth. The portfolio is performing exceptionally well. The cash flow is positive. The maintenance reserves are fully funded. The leverage ratios are conservative, protecting the assets against any sudden market downturns. I scroll down the list of active leases, stopping when I reach the entry for Unit B of the Elmwood Avenue duplex. The tenant names listed are William and Barbara. The ledger shows a string of perfectly green check marks. $1,800 deposited via automated clearinghouse transfer on the first day of August. $1,800 deposited on the first day of September, October, November, December. The rent for January cleared processing at exactly 2 a.m. They have not missed a single payment. They have not requested a single extension. The threat of the strict 3-day eviction clause hovering over their heads has proven to be a highly effective motivator. Our relationship exists entirely within the confines of this digital portal. We do not have Sunday dinners. We do not exchange text messages about the weather. When the garbage disposal in their unit jammed in late October, they did not call my personal cell phone to ask for a favor. They submitted a standard maintenance request ticket through the online system. I dispatched a licensed plumber who invoiced the corporation. The transaction was handled with the exact same clinical efficiency I apply to every other property in my portfolio. Thanksgiving passed without a single word spoken between us. I spent the holiday hosting a small dinner for Vivian and a few close colleagues from the brokerage. We drank expensive wine and laughed late into the evening. There was no tension. There were no petty insults. There was no underlying current of toxic competition. I did not waste a single moment wondering what William and Barbara were eating in their builder-grade duplex across town. Christmas arrived a month later, and the silence remained unbroken. They did not mail a card. They did not attempt to drop off a gift. They understood the new reality. They recognized that the boundaries I established on my porch 6 months ago were made of reinforced steel. They were no longer my parents. They were simply occupants bound by a legally enforceable contract holding a lease agreement that required strict compliance. The hierarchy is permanently dismantled. The people who once demanded absolute obedience from me now rely entirely on my administrative mercy for a roof over their heads. I close the property management portal and open my primary email account. A message from Vivian's brokerage sits at the top of the inbox. It contains the preliminary underwriting details for a small commercial strip center in East Nashville, hitting the market next week. The numbers look promising. The cap rate aligns with my acquisition criteria. I flag the email for review later this afternoon. As I sip my coffee, my thoughts briefly drift to Jessica. I have not seen or spoken to my sister since she slammed the door of her luxury sport utility vehicle and sped away from my house. The golden child vanished into the sprawling, chaotic underbelly of the Nashville rental market. I heard through the local real estate grapevine that Tyler eventually secured a mid-level sales position at a logistics firm. They are allegedly renting a cramped 2-bedroom apartment in a less desirable suburb, struggling to stay afloat under the crushing weight of their residual debt. The Brentwood mansion they lost was purchased by a corporate developer, leveled to the dirt, and replaced by 2 towering modern builds. The physical monument to their arrogance no longer exists. Jessica is living the exact life she predicted for me. She is renting a space she does not own, terrified of the first of the month, trapped in a financial cage of her own making. The irony is profound, but I do not dwell on it. I do not monitor her social media. I do not ask Vivian for updates. Jessica's collapse is not a source of vindictive joy for me. It is simply an irrelevant fact outside the perimeter of my life. I set my coffee mug down on the oak desk. I lean back in my leather chair, taking a slow, deep breath. The journey from the frightened, discarded daughter to the self-made chief executive officer was brutal. It required navigating an internal war of endurance, surviving extreme isolation, and mastering a ruthless, highly competitive industry. I had to rip out the foundational beliefs implanted by my toxic family and replace them with a framework built on disciplined logic and fierce independence. The emotional payoff sitting in this quiet office is deeply satisfying. I realize now that true wealth is not measured simply by the balance of a bank account or the number of deeds held in a corporate portfolio. Money is merely a tool. It is a mechanism for acquiring leverage. True wealth is possessing the absolute freedom to dictate the terms of your own existence. It is the ability to build your own table, decide exactly who is permitted to sit at it, and lock the door against anyone who attempts to disrespect you. My parents spent decades cultivating an environment where my worth was tied to their arbitrary approval. They weaponized shelter, using the threat of homelessness to enforce compliance. When they threw me out into the cold, they believed they were punishing me. They believed they were teaching me a harsh lesson about my own incompetence. Instead, they taught me how to survive without them. They taught me how to analyze distressed assets, negotiate hard terms, and build an impenetrable fortress. They handed me the exact tools I needed to eventually purchase their ruin at a discount. The doorbell chimes, breaking the morning silence. I stand up, walking down the hallway to the front entrance. I look through the glass pane beside the heavy brass handle. A delivery driver stands on the porch holding a large, flat, rectangular package wrapped in brown shipping paper. I unlock the deadbolt and open the door, stepping out onto the cedar planks. The crisp January air bites at my cheeks. The driver hands me the package, requiring a quick digital signature on his handheld device. I thank him, turning back inside and locking the door firmly behind me. I carry the package into the kitchen, laying it flat on the granite island. I use a small utility knife to slice through the heavy packing tape, carefully pulling away the brown paper. Inside the packaging is a custom-framed document. The dark mahogany wood and museum-quality glass encase a single sheet of heavy cream-colored paper. It is the certified warranty deed to my childhood home. The bold black ink spells out the legal description, the parcel number, and the recorded owner. Southern Roots Holdings. I pick up the heavy frame, admiring the clean, elegant presentation. I walk into my home office and approach the wall directly behind my oak desk. I carefully mount the frame on a heavy brass hook, adjusting it until it hangs perfectly level. I step back, admiring the display. The deed to the house, where I was told I would never amount to anything, now hangs as a trophy in the house I bought with cash. It is a permanent, tangible reminder of the power of discipline over entitlement. It is the ultimate trapdoor successfully sprung. I sit back down at my desk, pulling the commercial strip center underwriting file onto my screen. The sun continues to rise over Nashville, burning away the morning frost. The city is awake, buzzing with opportunity and movement. My name is Harriet Dawson. I am 29 years old. I am a real estate investor, the chief executive officer of Southern Roots Holdings, and the landlord to the people who threw me away. The family hierarchy is dead, the boundaries are secure, and I am ready to close the next deal. As a spiritual practitioner observing the shifting landscape of modern American society, I spend much of my time looking beneath the surface of our material pursuits. We live in an era where the optics of success, a sprawling suburban home, a luxury vehicle, a prestigious job title, often blind us to the rot festering within the foundation of our relationships. The story of Harriet Dawson is not merely a tale of real estate and financial retribution. It is a profound modern parable about the spiritual cost of vanity, the destructive nature of conditional love, and the quiet, undeniable power of personal resilience. When we look at William and Barbara, we do not see monsters. We see a tragic reflection of a cultural sickness. In their pursuit of the ultimate American image, they confused enabling with parenting. They sat at a Thanksgiving table surrounded by the scent of roasted sage and the glint of expensive crystal, and worshipped the illusion of their eldest daughter's success. An $800,000 mortgage was not viewed as a crushing liability, but as a trophy of their own parental achievement. In a traditional family structure, the sacred duty of a mother and father is to provide a foundation of fairness, emotional awareness, and honest guidance. Parents are meant to be the steady soil from which all their children can grow, honoring their unique paces and differing strengths. But William and Barbara played a dangerous, ego-driven game. They crowned a golden child to validate their own pride, and in doing so, they required a scapegoat to carry their insecurities. They labeled Harriet slow. They mocked her cautious, disciplined nature. They stripped her of her dignity to inflate a balloon of false wealth that was destined to pop. From a spiritual perspective, the moment William locked that deadbolt, he did not just abandon his daughter. He abandoned his own moral center. He sacrificed truth on the altar of appearances. Yet the universe has a remarkable way of balancing the scales. The spiritual journey teaches us that the stone the builders reject often becomes the cornerstone. Cast out into the cold, stripped of any familial safety net, Harriet was forced into the crucible of self-discovery. She did not seek revenge through anger or malice. Instead, she cultivated wisdom. She embraced the quiet, unglamorous grind of early mornings and exhausted nights. She transformed her profound rejection into an unshakable resilience. Harriet's path illustrates a vital lesson in self-improvement. True power does not come from screaming the loudest at the dinner table. True power comes from discipline, emotional regulation, and the mastery of one's own reactions. By removing emotion from her business and building her wealth in the shadows, she practiced the ultimate spiritual discipline of detachment. She built a sanctuary for herself, brick by brick, rooted in the undeniable truth of hard work rather than the fragile promise of credit. The eventual collapse of her parents and sister was not an act of Harriet's vengeance. It was the natural, inescapable law of cause and effect. When a family is built on a foundation of emotional deceit and financial fabrication, the collapse is only a matter of time. The driveway confrontation, the sight of a once proud father and an arrogant sister standing amidst garbage bags, is a stark reminder to all parents. If you teach your children to value image over integrity, you are handing them the tools for their own destruction. If you enable their financial and moral recklessness, you will eventually drown in the very waters you push them into. Parenting in America today requires a profound shift in consciousness. It requires the courage to teach children that renting a small apartment with honest money is infinitely more honorable than leasing a mansion with deceit. It demands that we look at all our children with equal eyes, recognizing their inherent worth regardless of how their achievements look on a holiday greeting card. It requires the emotional awareness to apologize, to guide with humility, and to love without conditions. Stories like Harriet's serve as a mirror, reflecting the quiet truths we often try to hide behind closed doors. They challenge us to examine the foundations of our own lives and the boundaries we set to protect our peace. If you are on a journey to understand these deeper human dynamics, if you are seeking to cultivate wisdom, confront toxic cycles, and build a life of genuine resilience, I invite you to subscribe to Blueberry Revenge. Join our community as we continue to explore the complex, sometimes painful, but ultimately liberating lessons that life offers us. As we reflect on this tale of a locked door and a transferred deed, we are left with a lingering, uncomfortable thought. We spend our lives building homes, filling them with furniture, and inviting people to sit at our tables. But what is the actual currency we use to pay for these lives? Look closely at the people sitting across from you tonight. Are you nurturing their spirits, or are you simply using them to reflect your own pride? The structures we build with ego will always eventually fall to the auction block of life. And when the dust finally settles and the illusions are stripped away, you must ask yourself, who will be standing on the porch holding the keys?